I didn't sell out, son. I bought in. Keep that in mind.
Welcome to the Independent Characters, episode 246. This is Carl.
This is Campbell.
And this is our second time going through this. Campbell, your voice is becoming a staple of the show for the time being. But listen, I just want to thank you very much for filling in while you're taking a break from the 40K Badcast, and Dan's off taking his break.
Yeah, no, I just like talking into microphones, really, yeah. And just thank you for giving me the opportunity to keep doing that.
Anytime. Both you and Dan are always welcome to come join us on the show. So
I'm Dan. He's the other guy.
Don't start. Don't start. I will mess it up, I swear. Listen, I just got Jody and Josh straightened out. The last thing I need to do is start with Campbell and Dan.
Yeah, Jody's the one with the beard, right?
Stop. Okay, so before we get started, this episode, the title of the episode is Why Campaigns Fail and What to Do About it. And before we get started, I want to just thank our show sponsors, Gene Higgins and Derek Dominguez, for your support through our Patreon. We very much appreciate it. And again, we're part of the Goonhammer Media Network, so make sure you check out media.goonhammer.com for more shows and information, including back episodes of 40K Badcast at this point.
Yeah, there'll be back episodes for a minute, but when we're back, you'll see us on there too.
Yeah, you'll know because you disappeared from here too.
I can spend 6 hours a week podcasting. I'm sure my wife won't mind.
We just talked about how being a content creator is wonderful.
Oh yeah, it's occasionally a bit of a grind.
So let me just kind of set the stage here. So the topic, why campaigns fail, as I had it in our notes initially, Campbell, you said that seems really negative,
unusually negative for the ICs.
Yeah. And I think the title belayed kind of like, well, yeah, it's why they fail, but what you can do about it, right? It wasn't just, well, here's a list of things that suck. But the first half will be kind of why things suck, and then the second half will be kind of what you can do about it. So we'll end on a positive note.
Yeah, it's a positivity sandwich.
But I think campaigns and campaign systems can be super fun when they execute well. Like, they can be really great. They can help you, build narratives and stories and things you talk about long-term as they involve long-term goals and objectives and that kind of thing. And usually teams working with each other. I've found them to be a lot of fun.
I find a good campaign can be the sort of thing that you can almost form a game group around that common experience. Mm-hmm. And you can look back on this shared cool time where you saw these things evolve and change, and they kind of become the lore of you and your friend group. Like, if I talk to my buddy Peter and I mention the name Big Chungus, he'll know my Goliath gang leader with that heavy bolter and the suspensors, who is an absolute terror on one of our events. If I go to my old buddies from my old Dorka Morka days and I mention the name Flash Pants Grashnak, they'll know the exact Orc Blood Bowl player who ascended to legendary levels there.
Yeah.
So
we still reference, I ran a Dungeons and Dragons campaign for 2 to 3 years back in 2nd edition, and our friends still talk about things from that campaign. Every new campaign we would play in D&D, we make some stupid reference to that one. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're right. Like, a successful campaign can extend lore within your group. You raised an interesting point there, which you said it can be something you form a group around. I think in particular we'll primarily focus on miniatures stuff here, but I think for things like role-playing games, you almost have to have a group that is 100% on the same page for it to be a successful event. I think this is why pickup role-playing games tend to have a real hit or miss type of approach.
Yeah, I'll gladly play a pickup game of 40K, but if anyone offers me to do a pickup game of D&D with a bunch of strangers,
I'll pass.
Yeah, I think I'm going to politely decline and never talk to that person again.
I'm with you. In fact, I used to go to conventions a lot and play role-playing game conventions, and then I would play like these, scheduled role-playing games. I even ran a few. It was real hit or miss. Like sometimes it was really, really solid. Other times it was a real disaster. And I played in, and I won't mention the game or the creator, but I played in a fairly popular role-playing game. And one of the prizes in this entry that you went into was actually playing the game with the person who created the game. And they're a very well-known name. And they were terrible. They were so bad. Like it was so bad. It was,
oh man,
it was weird too. And you were just like, oh yeah, I think I'm going to go do my own thing. And I won't use the person's name, but I'll tell you when the mic is off, but I was very disappointed.
Oh, that's a shame.
And it wasn't one of those things where it's like, yeah, we had different tastes or different. It was like, oh, this person's weird.
It's like, oh, I'm learning a lot about this person right now, and I wish I wasn't.
Never meet your heroes. That's what they say.
Not a one time.
All right. Well, before we get started with the main topic, let's launch into our normal pattern. And we'll start with elite choice. Why don't you go first?
Okay. I'm going to go with these stormtroopers converted by Lefteris Papadopoulos. These are so freaking cool. They're conversions of the Tempestus Scion and I think the new Tempestus Aquilon kits with a bunch of other stuff. I think there's some third-party bits. There's a lot of green stuff in there. And on the one part, they look a lot like the 3rd edition Stormtroopers, which were the not the Kasserkin, but the ones that came before that, which I really have a soft spot for, being of a certain vintage. But they also have this really gritty, like very Stalker or Shadow of Chernobyl sort of look to them that I really dig. And yeah, right now they're still just in the green stuff, plastic, and bare materials phase. I'm looking forward to seeing how Lefteris paints these things, though, because they look so freaking cool.
But man, I'm always impressed when we were looking at these earlier. I'm always impressed with people who add a bunch of green stuff to models. And there's not a ton here, but even a little bit is like impressive because I'm just not good with green stuff sculpting. And I haven't put in the time to be good at it. About the only time I did a really good green stuff was I put a mohawk on a guy. And it's like, that's fairly easy.
Yeah. I've done like a fur cloak a little bit, like a fur tabard, or done a little bit of gap filling, but that's about as far as my green stuff skills go.
Gap filling's about as far as I can go too.
Yeah. Because if you just smooth that over and sand it down, like that's most of what my green stuffing is.
Yeah. Shell put together a bunch of Felgor Beastmen. And she's been painting him up, actually. Every time I turn around, she's sitting at the painting desk painting. I'm like, man,
that's awesome.
I am living life great. It was kind of I wouldn't say the first time she's assembled stuff, but she's not, I would say, super practiced in assembling stuff. And so one of the pieces she put together, they're very specific on this arm goes to this guy and yada, yada. I was like, oh, that's not right. Like you have this huge gap here. And she's like, what do I do about it? And I said, I think we can figure it out. And I was able to, as you just said, like imitate the fur a bit and put some green stuff filling in there. And now you can't even tell. It looks great. That's like that's the extent of what I can actually pull off.
Right. And they've done a nice mix of like those organic textures or like soft textures with like cloth and so on, and the kind of more hard line, like not quite like firm, whatever the hood material is on that sort of right there. It looks real good. And I think any any roughness there might be left in there is going to get smoothed out by painting real quick. So these things look great. I'm looking forward to seeing how they come along.
Yeah. A lot of times the paint will hide some of it too.
Wait, why do you think I paint so much?
Yeah. But, man, like Justin is pretty good at sculpting green stuff. And I mean, like, I don't think he could sculpt like a whole miniature, but he could add, I think, probably a cloak to somebody and that kind of stuff. And sometimes it blows my mind. So
Every like
Great.
4 years, I'm like, I should try to do green stuffing, and I do like one model. I do like one thing of a model,
Yeah.
and go, cool. That beast has been fed. I don't need to think about this for another 4 years.
I chose Lucas Lucian and his tank here, which is a
It's a shadow sword.
Shadow Sword. Thank you. I kept wanting to say Baneblade, but I knew it was the wrong version of Baneblade.
Mm-hmm.
But man, this type of painting is absolutely incredible to me. The cell shading, the I don't know. I don't even know what you call it. I don't even know what you call it. But like the panel shading, right? The panel shading on all this is just fantastic, and his choice of colors just look amazing. Like an entire army like this would be absolutely incredible. And it's clearly done with like incredible skill. There's just fantastic bits added onto it. The lighting effects on it are subtle and perfect. And it's just like every piece of this I love. I just love every piece of this.
It's so high contrast and easy to read, which I really love.
Yeah.
And I feel like doing something in this sort of color palette, which is this like very strong primary red, blue, yellow color palette, can look cartoonish and in some cases kind of toy-like, but he's done such a great job with little things like little tabards hanging off. There's some weathering going on there. He was like very subdued with all of the metallics that it kind of grounds it and keeps it from looking too much like a toy. And I think it looks beautiful. I would also love to see a whole army of these guys. It is so striking. Like this is the kind of thing that will catch your attention from across a convention hall.
It's interesting because it doesn't look realistic, right? Like a tank does not look like this, but it looks awesome.
Yeah.
Like you said, it you could have gone like if it wasn't done with such great skill, I think it would look too cartoonish, but here it looks amazing. So really well done, both to Lefteris Papadopoulos and to Lucas Lucian. These are both fantastic examples of just awesome work. I'm just very excited to see what comes about. So the other thing is Shell's Kiss, and oh my God, you'd think I'd get used to pronouncing this name, but Aditya Manhalangan Dingra. Again, we just mentioned last episode, but his Tyranids, as Shell called them, the Tyranids in paradise, because they're amongst palm trees and all this stuff. He had said that they were inspired by dart frogs, the color scheme on them, and just the detail work on these guys. You know,
that's so wild. That's
so good. It's so good, man. And like, you know, Bryce in our group is painting his Tyranids up, and they are pretty detailed as well. And every time I see them in person, like the pictures haven't done them justice. So I know the pictures here are not doing justice to what this thing looks like in person too. And I watch Bryce, he's painting this whole Tyranid army in this pattern that I'm just like, there is no way I would take the effort to do this. And every piece comes out amazing. And I sold him actually my Bio Titan, which was unpainted for years. It just sat in my cover. And I was like, Bryce, if you want one, I'll sell this one to you. And I sold it to him. So I cannot wait to see Bryce paint it up. But it's kind of similar look to these guys. But Shell absolutely loved this. She was just blown away by it. So
yeah,
and you're killing it, man.
Her taste, as always, is immaculate. This model absolutely rules. It was in the running for me for my elite choice as well. But then I was like, oh, I don't want to give this guy elite choices 2 goes in a row.
Let his head. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have purple on it. And now the yellow is her secondary color.
Well, it's got like a purplish red tone and like the meaty bits, for lack of a better term.
It's not the dominant color is my point.
This is true. But the thing that's wild about this is like the basing is so bam, like it's so bright, it's so big, it's so green that it would threaten to overpower 90% of models. But because this one has so much, like every highlight is going almost all the way up to white, it actually does like pop out from behind that tree in a really pleasing way. And again, the striations, the dots, the shading, like everything about this absolutely rules. And again, just like with your choice here, contrast is the name of the day, and not Citadel contrast, lowercase c contrast. Like it looks fantastic. Love this guy.
I mean, he said in his post after I had said they were amazing that his lore for them was similar to what I had said with my Tyranids, that like a splinter fleet kind of fell off and they wound up in this jungle planet. And he said that he was inspired by the poison dart frog when painting this. The problem I had with mine is mine were supposed to be on this swamp planet, and I did the bases kind of matching the scheme so they don't pop like these do. And these just like, it matches the scheme. Like it's the jungle environment matches the bright color of this, and it works so much better. That's the one regret I have about my Tyranids is their basing, but this stuff looks incredible. So great work. Stop trying to steal my wife. And yeah, it's so all right. You know what? Let's do this. Let's launch right into hobby progress. I don't have a whole lot to talk about. You have quite a bit as usual.
I've got a bit, yeah.
Initially I put, I haven't done anything, but then it occurred to me, wait, I have been working on. So I pulled out, because of our episode around boarding actions. Mm-hmm. I'm not okay. So I had a huge Ultramarines army for a while, and I stopped playing Ultramarines because, like, you know what, Space Marines kind of bore me. Like, one of the nice things I started them for was because they get to use so many toys, but the way they play compared to the way like Chaos plays just doesn't really appeal to me as much. But I still like Space Marines. I think they're cool and iconic, and so I have these Space Marines from the Indomitus box that just kind of floating around. Mm-hmm. I sent a bunch of Primaris Space Marines still on sprue that I'm never going to assemble, and I sent them over to my buddy Craig in Australia just yesterday. So he's starting up a Blood Angels army. It's his first army in like many years that he's started getting back into it. So I sent him a bunch of that stuff, but I kept some specifically for a boarding action force, and I haven't done a lot of painting on Primaris Marines at this point. So I'm doing them as Minotaurs because nice. I have that Minotaurs army from Edit Forge World still, which will never get played because they're all old Marines now and old units. But I did start painting these up as Minotaurs. I've gotten kind of the metallics on them. I've gotten the shoulder pads red. I'm starting to work on the details of their pouches and holsters and all that stuff. But the other thing I have, which I'm very excited because when I bought Ed's Minotaurs, I also got his whole Battle Fleet Gothic force for that. But also he sent me over 2.5 sheets, I should say, of Minotaurs Forge World transfers, which you can't get anymore.
Righteous. And
so those are sweet. And so also now that I'm super good at putting on transfers, I can put these transfers on and not be put off by doing that. So eventually I'll have like just a little boarding action force of these guys, and that'll be that. And then I'll move on to something else. But
will it be that? Because I kind of get the feeling I'll just paint a boarding action force is like the logical next step from it's just a kill team.
I think the reality is I'll paint them and I'll be like, yeah, they're fun to play with occasionally, but I'm not interested in progressing further in this. If I were going to progress further in another army, it would be probably something completely different than Space Marines. But also the thing I love is when I was painting Space Marines, even to this day when I paint Chaos guys, like I love painting Terminators. Like there's something about the scale of them that I find great. Like I can do like a lot of extra details on them and writing on them and all this stuff. Primaris Marines kind of match the old Terminator scale. And so I found that I really enjoy painting Primaris Marines as well.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's not exactly a hot take to say that the last like 7 years of Marine releases have been pretty good.
Yeah, they're freaking solid.
Primaris Marines they're fun to paint. There's a reason I love just painting brick after brick of 10 to 20 Black Templars at a time. It's a good scale.
Yeah. So it'll be a nice little force, but again, I don't expect that I'll grow that any further. So
solid.
Famous last words. But that's my intention. Like I just really don't want another Marine force.
Yeah,
like,
I understand that.
If I were going to do one, I probably would have took over my buddy Doug's project, which was Space Wolves, because he passed away and he was building that army specifically to play against my 1,000 Suns, and so I was like, oh well, maybe I'm done. I'm done with Marines after this.
Just when I think I'm out, they pull me back
until Howling Griffins or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what have you been working on, man?
Who I've been working on a lot of stuff that isn't 40K, but most of it is Warhammer at least. So we're in the right wheelhouse here. So if you've been on Warhammer Community recently, you may have seen my Iridan the Witness in their Stormcast Eternals roundup pretty recently.
Dude,
I got this model early for painting for Goonhammer, and whew, boy, I love this freaking model.
how good does it feel to get? And this is not your first time.
No, this is certainly not my first rodeo.
But how nice is it to get that recognition of, look, here's this thing I painted and it gets pushed out by Games Workshop. I mean, it's got to feel good.
It feels really good. I feel like a little bit of pressure to be like, all right, I've got to get this out on time, and it can't be, this is not ever going to be. I don't really do like too much in the way of like quick paint jobs, but I can't do like easy peasy slapdash sort of thing here. It's like, no, I've got to really pull out all the stops here. So there is that bit of pressure. A lot of it that is internalized, I'll be honest.
I would say it's self-imposed in a way, though.
Yeah,
like Games Workshop's not like finish painting this or else, you're just like, hey, look, I painted this.
My perfectionism is that's all living up here.
Yeah.
But it feels really awesome getting my stuff on Warcom. Like, I think I mentioned this last episode or another time pretty recently, but it's as close to feeling like showcased in White Dwarf as I ever would be. And it just feels awesome having my stuff be seen by more people, which is really cool and kind of contributing to that overall fabric of the hobby. Because I think about how, like, social media, posting online, all that stuff is a whole array of brain poisons. But when you think about, like, in the pre-internet age, how many fantastic painters are there who you'd never see? You'd never have seen their work, or if you did, it was only like once at a convention, never again. And it's not really like out there. It's not memorialized in any way. So having this stuff just kind of living more or less in perpetuity online and being seen by new people is really cool. And it makes me feel good to see that stuff be recognized, and it always feels good to have people say nice things about your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, first off, the basing on this model is really cool. By the way, it's just a nice choice of colors. I think it looks really cool. I wouldn't have ever thought to kind of go that route. But the other thing I would say is it kind of has the same dopamine hit, I think, as, like, I own a lot of armies, and several of them, if not probably the majority of them, are commission painted. Mm. But when I put my army on the table that I painted, and people are like, oh, that looks really good. Like, it's a totally different, you get a real hit of, like, somebody recognized the effort I took to do this, not the money I spent to have this done, and I mean, the same with Shell's Night Lords. Like, if people looking, they're like, man, this lightning looks great. Yeah, Carl got better at it as it went on. Shell's going to do the next one. So that's the only way to get good at it, is to just keep doing it. But man, I'm so excited for you that this is getting the recognition it deserves. And next stop, White Dwarf, buddy.
I appreciate it. Honestly, I can reach out. I might be able to shake some trees and see what falls out.
When I remember we were doing the several years ago when the big fires happened here in California. Mm-hmm. Not last year, not the year before that, but
right. The big
5 or 6 years ago,
the real big ones. Yeah, I get you.
The one where the sky turned orange. Mm-hmm. We did this whole thing where we donated a bunch of stuff and organized our community to donate gift cards or models or whatever. We replaced a bunch of people's armies. I went out to Forge World. I happened to be in the area. I was in Belfast, and they're like, can you come over? We're going to do this. We'll paint an HQ unit for each army, for each of these 15 people or whatever it was. And I was like, well, I can't come over. I'm working. I go, but I can come over Friday, so I flew over there Friday, and I got to go back in the studio and stuff. And all the painters that, the ones that are all doing their own YouTube channels now and all that, we're all there. Everybody's having a great time. They're all painting, a model for each person, and they're broadcasting it live, and I'm on their broadcast, and I just start asking questions and whatnot. And at one point they're like, well, do you want to paint one of these for one of the people? And I'm like, nobody wants that. I'm like, let me see. Do you want a heavy metal painter to paint your thing, or do you want Carl Tuttle of the independent character? Let me think about that for a second. How about the heavy metal painter?
Yeah. So, who got the short straw here? I
did not paint one. What I did was I took over their broadcast and let them all do the painting.
Perfect.
Okay, so you got this guy, and now keep going. What else?
Yeah, I've painted some friends for him too. Got the Lord Celestin in here. I didn't get her done in time for the Warcom submission, but I still got her done. And again, I'm carrying over this like lush basing across the army. The inspiration for the basing in the army, which is, again, it's for those who aren't doing like a visual feed here, it's a lot of flowers, it's a lot of bushes, it's a lot of like natural textures, is I was driving in through the Cascades here in Oregon, and I had to stop to pee. So I pulled over on the highway, which is in like the rainforest, and just got off and like walked into the bushes, and it was like dead silent and just like colorful and lush and beautiful and bright. And I was like, I've got to find a way to incorporate this into an army. Zip back in the car.
Wait, to be clear, the lush forest, not the urination.
Yeah.
I gotta find a way to incorporate this.
I gotta
moment.
use this. Yeah, I need to memorialize this particular moment in time. No, the lush vegetation, not the bodily functions.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's why like a lot of these bases have like bits of juniper bark on the on the ground and stuff like that, and like pebbles that I found around and so on. You obviously don't like steal stuff from state parks or anything like that, but you know, there's places where you can just find some crud in the ground. So it's a combination of a lot of that and like woodland scenic stuff and gamer's grass, grass tufts, and some arm of hair stuff as well.
The other interesting thing about this model is you went with a black skinned individual in this model. What drove your decision there?
It's a fantasy setting. Anyone can be anybody. So I'm just like, I want to have a dark skin tone in this character.
That's pretty awesome, actually. Yeah. Like, I think it mixes it up across an army too, right? Like, it makes sense. There's going to be a bunch of diversity across.
That's the sort of thing. It's the sort of thing like, I remember I painted a regiment of like Empire swordsmen a while ago, and I gave them a mix of skin tones, and I posted it in some like Warhammer Facebook group, and someone started giving me shit about it. Sorry, I cussed in the show. My apologies.
It's all right. We have an
explicit tag. You don't use it often, but
I don't use it often, but it's
someone started giving me some crap about it.
Yeah,
and I'm just like, it's a fantasy setting. They aren't strictly from real world 16th century Germany. They didn't have steam tanks. They didn't have griffins.
They're shooting magic, and this is your problem.
Yeah, and this is your problem. So Age of Sigmar is even further removed from history. And again,
I think this is awesome looking, dude.
Thank you. And I just also find it's good for contrast sake too. It's good to just make the army feel more alive. And it's also just, I love painting bare skin. I love painting faces and arms and all that sort of thing. Like, I've got a whole bunch of like Dark Oath models I painted too. Same sort of situation. And having that sort of thing to change up is just, it's nice just for variety's sake too.
Yeah.
Because I just remember back in like the days, it was like, all right, paint your guy's face with dwarf flesh and hit it with flesh shade and call it a day. And I like having a lot more fun and introducing a lot more colors than that.
Flesh shade. It's like the old Crayola crayon. Flesh color. Is it?
My favorite.
You want to hear something funny? I saw a video recently. Have you ever played South Park, The Stick of Truth, the video game?
I haven't played it, but I'm aware of it.
All joking aside, it's a great game. Like, it is shockingly good for a video game.
Obsidian made it, I think, and they
I think so.
Those creators, yeah.
But one of the jokes in it is, you know how when you first install a game, how you're setting things up and how you're like, turn down the brightness till you can see this thing just barely, and change all your settings and what's your difficulty setting and blah, blah. The difficulty setting in it is a slider that goes from left to right, and it has a South Park character. And as you move it to more difficult, the character becomes darker skinned. And it literally says at one point, the character says, this isn't going to change combat and the difficulty of combat, but it's going to make everything else in your life harder. And I was like, wow, that is an amazing statement. Like, and I mean, don't take that the wrong way. Like, what the authors are saying is we're acknowledging this is, and I was like, that is brilliant. That is a brilliant and subversive piece that they just put into that video game.
That's a good, like, called shot right from the first 30 seconds of the game.
Exactly. It was so good. All right, moving on.
Right. Yep. Painted a few more Stormcast things. I painted up the Lord Relictor, which I showed this.
So good.
I showed this to my buddy Nick, and he was like, "Why does Stormcast chaplains go so much harder than Space Marine ones?"
Ah, man, do you think so? I don't know.
I mean, Space Marine chaplains aren't usually carrying a dead guy with them. You usually have to get like Like, all right, we got the Primaris Ancient. That guy's carrying a dead guy, but he's normal.
You have to be a lieutenant to nail him to your shield.
That's the thing is like, I've done like the skull count per model before, and occasionally you get into like the high 30s, low 40s on an infantry model, and you're like, all right, this is a bit. But with this guy, it's like, yeah, there's really only like 4 or 5 skulls on this guy. He's got one behind him, but they're all full size. They're not little decorative ones.
His pose is phenomenal too.
I think the thing is, he just looks mean.
Yeah.
Like I gave him the hooded head too, because just that little bit more sinister with the skull face and everything.
This could easily convert to a 40K model.
Oh yeah. Half the comments on like when I posted this, like half the comments
nice
like,
chaplain.
Nice chaplain.
It's not chaplain.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, I mean, he sort of is, like in the way that Stormcast sort of Space Marines, but
yeah. He's sick looking dude.
I've
not seen this model before, actually.
Yeah, this is one of the new ones too.
It's so good.
There was a Lord Relictor in the very first box set back in like 2015, and they gave him a glow up, and now he's not a tubby giant golden boy anymore.
He looks fantastic. The new line. I mean, look, I know how controversial it was that they like eliminated a bunch of stuff, and then they're like, "Hey, I think we talked about this last episode." But I have to tell you, like, well, at least it improved the look.
Well, I think the thing is, if you have your old Lord Celestin or your old Lord Relictor or a bunch of these, you can still use them. Old Liberators, they still have hammers and shields. You can still use them the same way. The new ones just look much prettier.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. All right, keep going. I'm sorry to keep interrupting.
You're good.
It's some great stuff.
Thank you. I painted up a squad of 6 Griffhounds, which is just like a Stormcast little chaff filler unit sort of thing. I think these were ones a buddy of mine gave me. He just had them line run for and I just took them from like gave him a beer or whatever and got these guys. And yeah, it was just fun, just paint some animals. I think that's one of those, like I painted just like a regular bear a couple of years ago as like a regimental mascot, and it was so refreshing to just paint like an animal without a lot of wild stuff on it. And that was kind of the case with these. Just nothing too special, just kind of easy mode, vibing out. Use the same paint recipe I used for Iridan's big old griffin. So these little burb dogs went pretty quick.
Sometimes it's nice to kind of break it up too, like with something totally different.
Yeah, something that isn't all edge highlights and freehand details and so on. And speaking of breaking it up, I did a little bit of BattleTech stuff after this. I'm not going to go too deep into what
you can. It's okay. John Campos, who's a member of our group, really isn't playing 40K these days. All he's playing is BattleTech. So we keep giving him a bunch of crap while we're playing Space Marine too. He's like, it's BattleTech night. I can't play. We're like, what are you doing? This is heresy. These look awesome. But I've been following your BattleTech stuff for a while now.
I appreciate it. I mean, this is definitely like my easy mode thing. Like this is the one thing where I don't go all out. Like this is all just washes and dry brushing and sponging and a little bit more weathering. But these things, like I can knock these things out in, I don't know, a couple hours as opposed to, grinding away for a week at some Space Marine character model or whatever. And it's very satisfying to just look into the crushing weight of my backlog closet, grab a little box and make it go away very quickly.
Yeah,
very satisfying.
There is value to that. Like Shell was kind of telling me the other day, she's like, you haven't painted anything in like 2 months. And I'm like, I know, but I painted so much in such a short period of time that I kind of think overdid it a little bit. So I'm trying to ease myself back into it at the moment. But yeah, there is something super satisfying about during that period, seeing my pile of opportunity dwindle as I was like knocking stuff out left and right. And then every time like Shell would be like, well, I need this kind of, like she needs a Vindicator now because she's seen how Vindicators perform.
Meta chasing Shell.
And Campbell said you're chasing the meta, Shell. I was like, oh, the way a unit's really good is it's sold out online. But they're available now. But every time I'd have to go purchase something, it'd be like, oh, but we're cutting down on everything that we have here. So anyway, that's again, another reason I sent off those Marines to my buddy. It's like,
oh yeah.
Well, I was never going to paint these things.
I was feeling pretty good about my backlog for a hot minute. And then my Battletech Mercenaries Kickstarter got delivered, and that's where these are both from.
Right.
And I didn't back at the like wackadoo $1 million level or anything like that, but I still got like 40 mechs and a whole bunch of rule books and other cool stuff. So this
how many mechs would you say you have painted? And are they all this scheme, the blue and white scheme?
They're a combination of schemes. Sorry, if you're audio only, my little orange cat, BJ Blasco Whiskers, just decided to jump onto the call.
It's the best name ever.
I've probably painted 100 mechs, I guess, at this
Holy
point.
smokes.
Something like that. I've probably painted about 50 in this blue and white scheme and like 20 in my Northwind Highlander scheme, which I don't paint as much of because it involves painting tartan, which even though most of the scheme is simple, I still got to do a patch of tartan, and that never gets easy. And then I've got like 30 more in my red team scheme. So I've got a nice mix of stuff. But yeah, these things, again, they're my quick dopamine hit. Oh, it's Animal Hour over here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You are good.
You know when Arya the Husky has gone to the bathroom because she comes running through the house like after she goes.
Well, it's better that she runs. It's better that she runs around the house after going to the bathroom as opposed to during.
I don't know why she does it, but she's done it.
Just that excited, just like I was in the Oregon rainforest.
Just want to let you know. Yeah, exactly. Nice callback. Okay, yeah. So bunch of mechs, which look fantastic.
Thank you. And yeah, that's all I've got.
That's you.
That's all I've got done, scare quotes. So yeah, quite a bit. Some of this stuff I'd gotten done a little earlier, but I couldn't talk about it yet because you got Warcom deadlines to hit. So I won't have this much to talk about every episode, usually.
Right. There was one episode where I just kept going on and on and on about this stuff I painted. I felt so good about myself for that one episode.
Yeah, there's definitely like Badcast episodes where it's like, oh, we hit the 1 hour mark and we haven't talked about anything but hobby progress and games played yet.
You know, interestingly enough, Campbell, one of the most popular segments of my show.
Oh yeah, that was always my favorite back in the day.
I'm kind of surprised about that, especially when I have a lack of it. But I think for me, like I kind of picked it up from another program, another show I'd listened to where I appreciated listening to from episode to episode, like how much progress they did or did not make. Because like if they didn't make progress, everybody's human, things happen. So I don't know. It always resonated for me. That's why when we came up with it, we're like, well, let's talk about this.
I think also if you're listening to a show, and again, if this sounds too much like I'm patting myself in the back right now, leave a comment somewhere. But when you listen to a show episode after episode, hearing how armies grow is really cool. And that's a really interesting insight into what that person's priorities are, what the army is looking like at that point in time. Because you saying, oh yeah, Shell's going after Vindicators right now. If you said that 2 years ago, I'd be like, is she insane?
She heard you get them free, Carl.
Exactly. But nowadays, like that gives you a notion. It's like, okay, Vindicators are good right now. And you kind of can see how these armies grow. And I think that's really cool.
It's an interesting point. And we have an episode on that list. I'm sure you saw that of lists of upcoming stuff that was like around how to build a force and how. So these are interesting topics we should carry over there.
Yeah. Let's
talk games played real quick. I have played a boarding action game after our episode that we recorded with Aaron. I got smoked. like, man, normally, I punch Aaron in the face repeatedly, but holy smokes, man. Like I could not get anything to work. And I had talked to our buddy Cheyenne about boarding action. He's played quite a bit of it. And both he and you are my resources, by the way. Like when we run into a rules question, I tell me about this rule because we can't seem to find it. So we were playing boarding action and he was telling me, oh yeah, like deep striking units are awesome. I'm like, okay, cool. And I have some Terminators. These guys will deep strike in. Oh boy, I'm really going to mess up Aaron's day. and then it was this mission we were playing and we were using my Zone Mortalis stuff, which worked great for it. But there was this mission where you checked each half of the board, each thing, because the lights were turning on and off, like they were losing power and regaining power. And if they turned off, if they were off in an area, you could not shoot outside of 9 inches and you could not charge something that you couldn't see. So you can't charge outside of 9 inches. So I deep strike these Terminators in. I'm like, I've got 2 units to choose from that I can assault with these guys. I'm going to mess this roll the die. Oh, the lights are off. So they couldn't charge and they couldn't shoot for the whole round. They just stood there. Meanwhile, he just mows into the rest of my stuff. And I was like, oh, I really shouldn't have hinged everything on that one.
Brutal.
One choice. It was a terrible choice. But man, boarding action is super fun. I don't know if you've actually played it yet, but
I've made a video about it. I've got a set of the Banjo boarding action terrain, and I haven't gotten to play yet. I really want to.
Together is a nightmare.
I know, but compared to maybe painting a set of the like plastic GW ruins, maybe it's kind of a 6 of one, half does the other one sort of situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see when you go. You got to shave down everything, dude.
Oh God, I know. So
it's awful, but. I mean, Shell and I were assembling it all together and like doing all that. And then we got to the point where we were shaving stuff down. She's like, this sucks. I'm like, yeah, it does. And now it's sat in the box ever since.
This is supposed to be something we do for fun.
That's right.
Where's the fun?
That's right. So I got smoked. Aaron, and you know what? Good on Aaron. Like he deserved to win.
He was due. Most
games when Aaron and I play, I end up pulling out a victory. But man, he crushed me hard that game. So I was excited for him. And then the other night, Shell was like, I want to play a game. And I said, okay, what do you want to play? And we just played a new board game we had. It was really fun. And then, which was a Kickstarter, of course.
Yep.
And then she says, I want to play 40K. And I said, oh, okay. Do you want to play, she goes, I don't know. We could play boarding action. We could play Kill Team. We could play a game of 40K. And I said, well, I don't know how to really play the new Kill Team yet. I go, let's play a full game. And we'll play 2,000 points, which is her largest game so far. We're about halfway through the game. She's exhausted. And I said, now imagine Todd played 4 of these in a day. I don't know how you do it. But the great thing about obviously having a game room like I do and everything is it's still out. We know it's my turn, the start of my command phase. So we know where it goes from here. And we'll wrap that game up probably in the next couple of days because we got some things going on in the evenings. But man, I think it's been fun. And to be honest, I think she's gonna win.
Hell yeah!
I think she's gonna win because we are just killing the hell out of each other, which is super fun. I'm up on points, but she has more units left on the board, and she's already killed my demon prince, and I screwed up at one point. I've only used Abaddon once before, and
that's shocking to me.
Well, I don't. He's like a 280 point model or something like that, and I just don't feel. See, this is the difference. Like you're running in the tournament scenes a lot, so it's like, oh, look, it's Thousand Suns. Well, there's Magnus, and there's because as you said on your guys' episode, which is the point I was pointing to people to the other day, is everybody comes to win, and we all understand that. So like. Nothing's off limits. Like it's, nothing within the rules is off limits. Right. And bad sportsmanship's off limits. But my point is everybody's there with the same objective. I tend to be like, Abaddon can't be at every battle. Why would I have him here taking up 290 points? So anyway, point being, I've only played him once before. And in that once before, I engaged with the what's the Necron? Nightbringer? Yeah. And Nightbringer's brutal. And Nightbringer also takes like half damage from everything.
Yep.
In my head, I had Abaddon takes half damage. That is not the case. Abaddon's toughness 5, 4 up invuln, 9 wounds. I'm like, okay. So I charge him out there. I separate him from his Terminator squad. I charge him into this thing. And one of the spider walkers. He destroys the hell out of it with Dragnite. I mean, super easy. Terminators wipe out a squad of Chaos Space Marines, get on the objective. And now Abaddon's standing out there, and I'm like, wait a minute, he does not take half damage from me. Like I had gotten it reversed in my head. I'm like, uh-oh. I'm like looking at his rules. I'm like, oh, and look, there's a Land Raider sitting right here in front of him. And she opens up with like all 4 las cannons and all this, and I made every invuln save. I was just standing there. I'm like, yeah, what else you got? I'm like, can I get back in the vehicle? I need to get him out of here. He's in trouble. So, anyway, the game's been awesome so far, and it looks fantastic on the table. I love seeing her Night Lords. She's been working so hard on them. I mean, she's gotten, like, she did all the venom crawlers. That's what they're called. She did all the venom crawler. I did a little bit of lightning on them, and then she went to town on the rest of it. So it looks great. And like I said, as we're recording, I see her sitting over at the painting table. She's painting her goat boys, as she calls them, over there. She's almost done. So
now this actually raises a philosophical question for me. So you get 10 points for battle ready, but if you take to the field with a unit that isn't battle ready, and in the intervening days before you continue your game, you finish that squad, do you get those 10 points?
That's an interesting question. We've never put units on the table that aren't painted.
Good.
So, but that's a very what is it? The ship of Theseus. Well, a ship of Theseus question. What if I remove those unpainted Terminators and put painted Terminators?
Precisely.
Is it the same army?
But there's one to think about, listeners.
But it's been super fun, and at one point, I always tell her I talk about her on the show, and she doesn't listen to this show. But now she's sitting there while I'm painting. She might have her headphones in. Anyway, she's, as we played through 2 rounds of it, she's like, I don't think I'm ever going to play this against somebody else. And I'm like, you will. I'm like, you will get the hang of it. She's really struggling with equal toughness versus equal strength 4s, below 3s, above 5s, unless double, then 6 or 2s. And so, I'm constantly like, don't think of it like a math problem. Think of it like, well, my las cannon is stronger than this guy, so it should be easier to wound him. And she's getting it. We just don't play often enough that she's getting the practice that she needs. So I think a few team games, more practice, she'll be fine. But she's always afraid of holding people up. We spent a lot of time looking at how some rules. I've not used flyers yet, and she's rocking her Helldrake that she painted, and I'm like, okay, how does this work? I'm like, oh my God, these things are fast.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's our game. It's still going on, but it's been a super blast, and it looks fantastic.
Nice. Looking forward to hearing how it finishes.
Me too. Me too. I think I'm going to lose. I swear. I think I'm going to lose. Not for trying. I'm trying to win.
So continuing my streak of not 40K related things, I had one game of Age of Sigmar against my buddy Barkin. We played at my friend Brad's. He was doing an outdoor cookout Warhammer game day, which I saw Lucas Lucian was also at something similar to that. And I was like, I see that. I know that's a good time. And yeah, we just had a great time hanging out, having some beers and Costco hot dogs and playing Warhammer. So he took Seraphon, I took my Stormcast. I did not bring Irridin because I don't know how to transport the damn thing yet, because look at how spindly bits of that model are. But this was my first time playing against Barkin, and he made so in Age of Sigmar, you generally don't want to go first, because if you go first, that opens you up to the double turn. He won priority, so he had the option to go first or second. I was like, all right, cool, I'm going to go. I'm figuring he's going to have me go first. And he goes, I'm going to go first. And I'm like, okay. And he moves everything up. And I'm like, okay. And then
if I get a double turn off.
Well, he has like the Bastillodon with the big, like, it's the Ankylosaurus with the sun laser on it. It shoots some of my guys, kills some, okay, and charges. And he gets like all these turn 1 charges off. And I'm like, all right, half your army is enveloped in all of my army. So I just come down with my annihilators, and they annihilate. They're pretty good at that. It's in the name. And I get the double turn, and I just bulldoze him like immediately. And much has been said about the double turn. I think some on this show, much in the Badcast. I think it's a feels bad mechanic and a skill check at the same time. Because
I'm on the fence about it.
On the fence about it. The thing is, if you can plan around it and you actually have like contingency plans, and you set yourself up, and you're able to like think 5-dimensional chess style and think about like multiple possibilities at once and multiple futures at once, it can feel awesome to get double turned and clap back,
weather it, and then slap back.
Yeah. And like that happened with me in like one of the last games I played at an AOS tournament, and it felt awesome. I still don't like it though, because against a player who isn't as skilled or experienced or isn't as well read in what your army can do, it can be very rouge to just be like, okay, cool, I'm just going to keep removing stuff from you for a while. And because Age of Sigmar,
and you got to sit there and take it. Yeah.
Right. And there's like a little bit of an opportunity cost, which doesn't matter. It's like, okay, I don't get to take the equivalent of a secondary objective for a turn, but I get to just double up on wailing on you. So you're still out of models at the bottom of 3. So it doesn't really matter that I'm down 4 points.
It would be interesting. Not that you're not an excellent player. Trust me, you guys say you're bad at the game, but you're full of baloney. But it would be interesting to talk to some top tier Age of Sigmar players and find out, what do you think about this double turn situation?
I would like to talk with players who are like a bit higher up on the competitive rankings than myself with AOS, because like I don't play AOS. I mentioned I played in the tournament. I'm not like a competitive AOS guy. I'm a competitive 40k guy, but AOS is like I just paint what's fun. I run what's fun. We'll see what happens. I try to play a good game, but I'm not too serious about it. But yeah, it's something I'm very curious about. It's something that can very often be kind of read in bad faith by a lot of people and scare people off somewhat justifiably. But I think any mechanic,
and I mean, this is a perfect example, but any mechanic looked at alone and in isolation, like doesn't tell the whole story. And so, as you said, if you can weather it, like if you can plan around it, have your contingency plans, like probably the best players are like, well, I'm going to do this, but what if I expose myself too hard and then he gets a double turn? So I better not expose myself that hard. Right. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear how they think about it.
Yeah. I would like to, not just because I want to get better at the game, figure out how to deal with it, but it's the sort of thing where if I'm playing like a super casual game with someone who doesn't play AOS a lot, like when I play with my dad, we don't play with the double turn. We just go alternating. As far as I'm aware, he doesn't know the double turn exists. I keep that secret from him.
It's like roll 4s.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's the game where we're just hanging out and rolling dice, and he's just like, "Tell me what to roll." Like, awesome, cool.
That's awesome that your dad. I mean, I've known this about you for years, but that your dad got you into this, and you still play, and that's really, really cool. My dad would have nothing to do with this silliness. My dad would be like, "Yeah, cool. Get your nose out of a book. I'm going to go scuba diving." Okay, Dad. My dad was the kind of guy that'd be like, "We're going to go camping. Yeah, we're going to hike in 12 miles and then we're going to spend, 3 days out here." And I'm like, this sucks. Like, this is not for me.
That's where I do all my, that's where I read all my Black Library novels is when I'm out camping. That's what I was just doing last week. But
I used to, I would go camping with him while he'd dive. Like, we'd go up Northern California and he'd dive off the coast there, Mendocino and stuff. And we'd have campgrounds, and I'd just bring books. I'd read fantasy books. Where get your nose out of that book. I think my dad's read like 4 books since I've known him.
Yeah, and it's like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
No, it's usually for him. It's all like Steve Jobs' autobiography. Oh yeah, I read it. Yeah, or this book about diving, which was actually quite good. I read it, but I think there's been like 4 books I know and he's read. So anyway, we're just birds with a different feather. Yeah. Okay. Let's do this. Let's take a short break. We'll come back and then we'll leap into the main topic of the show here. And it's going to sound like a bunch of complaining initially, but I promise it gets better by the end. So we'll be right back. All right, we're back. Before we get started, in honor of Dan and Campbell, gripping and ripping, I'm drinking a Asahi beer. It's a super dry Japanese beer that my Formula One club got me into.
I'm drinking a cold chillin' vanilla cream ale. It's like it's one of the sweetest things out there. I love it so much. I drank 3.
Let me see the can. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, it's from a local brewery, Wild Ride Brewing. We actually had a game event there at the start of 10th. We took over the back room at that brewery and just played like all afternoon. It was awesome.
That's awesome.
So yeah, if you have a group of folks and there's a brewery near you, they've probably got an event space, and there's probably days they're not using it for much. So you can probably get a nice sort of day going.
Sweetheart deal.
Yeah, that's definitely what we got. They were very happy to have us take that room because I don't think anybody was doing a wedding on like a Tuesday in October or whatever.
Hey, did I send you an invite to our White Elephant holiday thing?
You did. I haven't looked at it because
I know a lot of times you're a good distance away from me, but I just want you to know you're always welcome. So that's why I always
appreciate it. I will continue
to send the invites. Don't feel bad about turning it down.
So well,
but we can put you up too. Just saying.
Good to know.
Okay. So again, reasons campaigns fail was the whole point of the episode and what to do about those things. And so I wanted to go over kind of a list of topics around what were the most common reasons that these things fail, because even in the best of times, getting a group of 5 people together to play Dungeons and Dragons seems to be increasingly hard as you get older. I remember when I was a kid, we used to play D&D all the time. And I was like, man, can't wait till I'm an adult and then I can do whatever I want. And now I'm an
ice
adult
cream
and I'm
for
like,
breakfast and play D&D all day.
yeah, I can feel the hand of the Grim Reaper on my shoulder as I've gotten older. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to do with my time? Getting together to play, we play Dungeons and Dragons online quite frequently, as well as Call of Cthulhu. And, it's a great time, but nothing beats being in person for that kind of thing. But it just seems impossible to get people together on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So, even in the best of times, campaigns are tricky to get put into place. So the first problem that I think we kind of run into is player drop off. We've had campaigns where we start with 8 people and then next thing you know, it's only really 5 people engaged in the campaign at that point. So people can drop off for a number of reasons. One, they burn out, they're playing too much. Enthusiasm can kind of drop off after time.
Yeah, especially when there's not a clear endpoint or goal point, like mile markers along the way. It's really easy to burn out because you're just like, all right, cool. I just had game 5 of this campaign. How much longer are we doing this thing?
How long is it going on? Like, I'm interested, but not that interested.
Yeah. Like, back in the day, there was, at my old gaming group, Dork and Morka, we had this campaign for the Schindelgeist system, which had there is some like lore on the real thing, or quote unquote real thing in Warhammer. But it had this lavishly produced packet with pictures of all the planets, with like different conditions on each planet, being like, oh, if you're fighting in this, have this kind of battlefield, like all those sorts of recommendations. And each player had their own experience track, because this is 5th edition. This is well before Crusade.
Right.
And it was so cool when you'd like level up and get new equipment, new characters and so on. And there was an ongoing story that was being like updated on our forums every week. Like, okay, the Force of Chaos took, planet Chugula 5 or whatever. And okay, cool. This is what's going to happen as a result. But it had no endpoint. So it just kind of kept trundling along until I come in one week and I'm just like, I'm here for my league or my campaign game. And I look over and everyone else is playing Blood Bowl.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Yeah, an endpoint we'll talk about that too, is like an absolute must, and everybody needs to be on board with that. There are at least a couple people in my gaming group that I think have the best of intentions. Like they love the idea of playing in a campaign. They love the idea of playing 40K in some cases. But the commitment that it takes either to get an army together and actually play it, like they seem perpetually in the I'm painting, I'm building step, or the amount of commitment it takes to actually say, I'm going to commit to playing 10 games, 12 games, an indeterminate amount of games over a period of time. Like, I think they love the idea of it. Heck, I love the idea of it. But the actual commitment level involved in it, I think gets lost on a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, this is something where people's eyes are definitely bigger than their stomach.
Oh yeah, that's a good way.
Very often. I'm sure you could swap the nouns around in there to make it more gaming appropriate, but you get the idea.
Well, listen, most gamers got some pretty big stomachs, myself included. So, and then you have real life commitments, things that come up and get in the way. Especially as we get older, we have additional responsibilities. As much as I joked about being a kid and wanting to be an adult so I could do whatever I want, I'm married and maybe there's weddings to go to, there's other events we go to. It's hard to consistently, and locations may even be a problem, but it's hard to consistently get together just in general. So I think this is definitely, I think this is the number one reason campaigns fail is just, the lack of, everybody wants to, they think it's a great idea. And then things happen. I mean, I think we can look at Josh's latest Necromunda campaign, of which we had one day, we all played 3 games, 2 or 3 games. And it's like, we all left. Yeah. Okay. We're going to get together and play another game. I don't think anybody has played another game at this point. And so like, and in part because, well, things came up, Josh got laid off from his work and started, doing a bunch of contract work, which, him steering the campaign, and nobody's willing to pick up the reins, and myself included, and say, okay, well, hang on, let me step in while Josh is busy or whatnot. So life happens, right?
Yeah. I mean, we have a league coming up soon. One of my buddies I was having a talk with him the other day where he was just like, I don't want to disappoint our friends by not participating, but I'm not going to be able to make 3 weeks of it. And I'm just like, if you're only going to be there for less than half, it's a 5-week league, I think.
It's better to just say, nah, I got to bail out. Yeah,
it's better to bail out. Maybe volunteer to ring or something like that.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Which you can have those in campaigns. You can have interlopers or whatever. But yeah, it's just what you got to do. Like, I had to miss my weekly game night for 6 months this year because I was doing classes, taking some like UI UX stuff, which was cool. I've got that skill set now, but it meant I didn't get to do that stuff for a while. Like, God, our D&D group has had has had to keep moving around the week.
Yeah.
Sorry, my cat just decided to pull everything off my desk.
That's what cats are good for, man.
God, he's really good at that. Love getting beer on my work surface. Anyway,
I'm leaving this all in, by the way.
Oh, please do.
I don't edit this.
This is the real experience. This is the real life we talk about.
That's right. It gets in the way. Oh, yeah. Podcasts get in the way. Just scheduling the podcast. Thank God it's just you and I right now, because it's much easier to be like, when can you meet? When can I meet?
Right.
But as soon as you add a third person, okay, when can the triumvirate meet?
Right.
It's
like we had a D&D group which a player had to drop out because they're about to become a father, and they haven't been able to come back for obvious reasons. But it's had to move around the week as a result, working with people's schedules and everything. Like, this person's work schedule changed. When can we accommodate? And D&D on Friday night makes so much sense. It feels so right. D&D Monday afternoon, it's a little weird for everyone involved. We still do it because we get to hang out, but it's a weird time.
Yeah, and I agree with you.
I've had 3 separate RPG groups in as many years fizzle out because some of the players had breakups with each other.
Oh, yeah.
So if you want to end your relationship and you and your partner play an RPG together, just let me sit on a few sessions. Something will
take care of that.
I'm clearly the Grim Reaper of people's relationships. So
it's like when my kid moved into an apartment down in Southern California while going to school. Okay, so who are you moving in with? Oh, these friends. 2 of them are a couple. One of them is a couple. This is the first time they've been together. They're living together. I'm like, I look at my wife. This will not end well. Spoiler alert. Did not end well.
Yep.
It's almost like mom and dad knew what they were talking about. Yeah. Rules, overload, and complexity. So I think game fatigue can sometimes set in, especially with newer players, where, Necromunda has like a bunch of infinitesimal rules across it. Warhammer 40K, Age of Sigmar are about the same complexity in my mind, but the rules are fairly complex, as I could tell you playing with Shell, whose mind got kind of fried after 2 long rounds. I think you and I, being very familiar with the rules, you more so than me even, take it for granted the amount of decision making we have to make in a particular game. And it doesn't impact us as much as somebody who has no real clue as to what they're doing. And they're exerting a lot more mental effort. It's kind of like lifting weights, right? If you are just starting out, you're like, Jesus, this is the worst thing, but if you're probably regularly doing it, I just go and I yell like Justin in the gym and pump some iron, but it's a regular thing. So I think keeping track of not just now a single game of Warhammer or whatever, but now having to layer on top of that well, and then here's how it applies in the grander scheme of rules, can be a little daunting for people sometimes and can cause a bit of exhaustion.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many overloading different things. Like, I think one of the things that was really nice when everything was in an index was you could look at what your other armies do on a phone. So, and this isn't like me getting on my soapbox here, but like, if I was playing against Genestealer cults, an army I have no idea what they do, and I could just check that real quick instead of having to internalize that. Like, it's about lessening your mental load.
That's a very interesting point about what's available on the app. Like, it's not available to your opponent's army is not necessarily available to you on the app.
Yeah, which again, I don't want to.
I never thought about that actually in that direction.
It's definitely an accessibility thing, and I don't mean that in like maybe I do mean it that way. But yeah, it's something, having the information available to you is very helpful, and when it's not there, it means you've got to either internalize it, learn it otherwise, or get surprised.
Well, listen, Campbell, real tournament players just buy every codex.
Yeah, obviously. I definitely buy every single codex. That's why I finish in the top 8 at events routinely, because I spend a lot of money. No, I do well because I play the same goddamn army over and over again. I've played just Black Templars for all of 10th edition to reduce that mental load.
There's something to be said for that. Yeah.
It means I'm pretty good at that army and I know what they do. And
every stat, oh, this is how this works. There's no changing up. We'll have to talk about this too, because one of your thoughts was around playing the same list over and over again. I think that's a topic that has some legs, and we'll talk about that later.
For sure.
We recently started talking about Crusade, and Aaron and I are playing a Crusade game right now. We played a Crusade game. We're continuing to play Crusade games. It's lighter than it used to be, but it is yet another layer of rules you have to do post game, and you have to pay attention kind of what's going on during the game. A lot of times you can kind of go back and analyze, like, oh yeah, this guy killed the guy and this guy killed these units, and it's not that complicated for a person who is used to it.
Yeah, there's a bit of a threshold and a bit of a learning curve to get in there.
But
you use the phrase game fatigue here, and I kind of had another thought of what that means, which is that people just get kind of tired of playing the same game sometimes.
Very true.
Because like what games are in your scene is likely going to change. Like even at my store, which is like nominally a 40K group, it's nominally like our group is the Codex Creeps, even like that's our competitive team name and everything. Like we are a 40K group who plays mostly 40K. But if last time I went in there, let's see, I was playing 40K, but there was like Battletech, Marvel Crisis Protocol, Age of Sigmar Spearhead, and Blood Bowl all going on that night. And that's where people's interests are. People's interests are all over the place. So if your group is really gung-ho about 40K, and they'll be gung-ho about 40K in 8 weeks, fantastic. But if only half of them are going to still want to play because they want to do something else, like that, I think that is another level of game fatigue. Yeah.
No, that's a very good point. I mean, just like we were talking about the painting earlier, sometimes it's nice to change it up. People are going to feel like, I want to do something else other than play the same list that I've been playing, or the same, army I've been playing. And speaking of armies, like you can have power creep or power drought in some cases, where certain armies are factions. Power outage, where certain armies may become stronger, either through one, rules in the campaign, or two, maybe a new codex drops or something in the middle of a campaign. We ran into this. I wrote an entire campaign based off of the Fall of Orpheus Imperial Armor campaign system. For those who don't know, Fall of Orpheus was an Imperial Armor book with Necrons versus Marines and Imperial Guard. But the campaign system developed in it, which is also you've seen in a lot of the Black Book Horus Heresy campaign systems. I mean, it was all developed by Alan Bly and John French. It's you can create whatever you want, like the narrative you want around it, which is really cool. And it's actually a really great system. I created this narrative. Tyranids had just come out. Hey, who wants to play Tyranids? Okay, these people are all going to play Tyranids. The rest of the people are going to play whatever. I create the narrative around the game. We start playing. Let me tell you about Tyranids in 7th edition. Man, were we on the back foot. Like it was to the point where it became hard because I always want to players playing Tyranids, but it was like, I felt like as the campaign organizer, I think Tyranids should get like 25% more points on a list than the rest of it was so bad. Like Tyranids were just in such a bad spot that, one side just completely dominated the whole campaign, and then it ended, but boy, it was a struggle for the Tyranid players. They felt really demoralized.
Yeah. I mean, some days you are literally the bug and they are the windshield. And
we were the bugs.
Unfortunate.
Yeah. And talking about that system, which is a great system, and we'll talk about that later too. Poor campaign design can be a problem. You can have a lack of clear structure and goals. You talked about this right at the top of the segment, which is what's your end date, right? How do these things work so that everybody's on the same page? If things are not clear, you're why are you even playing?
Right. Without structure or goals, you may as well just be playing pickup games every week. For sure. We listed here one-sided storylines, campaigns that overly favor one side's narrative without giving the other players agency or the ability to really react. And this, I would say, kind of the old Imperial Armor books used to be guilty of. The Taros campaign is a fantastic one. It's Tau versus Imperial Guard primarily. But like every mission you would play, it would say, here's what the Tau list is, and here's what the Imperial Guard list is. It was very old school war game. That's historical war games 101 right there, which rules, but is obviously not for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, well, it was, I think, initially created by guys who were into historical wargaming stuff.
Wait, are you telling me that the people who made 35 different Lehman Russ variants with a trench rails kit were into historicals? I'm shocked, I tell you.
Warwick Kinraid was the guilty party in this case.
All the treadheads.
But the interesting thing, like, about those campaign books is you would read them and it'd be like, oh, and then this is what happened at this battle, and this is what happened at this battle, and this is what happened at this battle. And then it's like, and here's the units over there, go play it. And it's like, okay, historical wargamers enjoy, I think, here's the Battle of Gettysburg. And this is how it all turned out, and here were the units, and go ahead and play it and see if you can do better, I suppose. But I think it removes a little bit of the agency from some people who are like, well, I don't want to bring that kind of unit, I want to bring this kind of unit, or I want to do things a little differently. It kind of steals that away. Or in role-playing terms, this would be like a railroad campaign where the NPCs come in and save everybody all the time. It's like, why are we even here if the non-player characters are going to come in and save us every single time? It doesn't make any sense.
Unless everybody is involved and knows what they're getting into, then that doesn't really work. Because if I'm doing an Armageddon campaign and it's just like 4 orc players and a combination of Marine and Guard players on the other side, awesome. We're probably going to have a very good time. But when you've got, we have 3 orc players and there's an Eldar player in there, and we've got 3 Marine and Guard players and a Necron player. All right, how is this still Armageddon? How is this still? Yeah.
And that's one of the struggles with 40K and probably Age of Sigmar to a degree too, is like, how do we ramrod this army that has nothing to do with this particular battle into it? And there was a campaign that was released a long time ago. It was Chaos versus, I want to say, the Imperials, and then the Dark Eldar are in there for like no reason whatsoever.
The Dark Eldar are in there because Phil Kelly played Dark Eldar.
I was going to tell you that's exactly why.
Crusade of Fire. It's on my shelf over there.
That is exactly why Dark Eldar were there. Phil Kelly wanted to play Dark Eldar, and they were like, okay, I guess Dark Eldar are there too.
Yeah, it's the thing where the Imperium versus Chaos is a very neat sort of like versus, and then you always have to have Xenos interlopers, I guess. If you're writing a campaign that has anything related to a cogent story, you need to figure out what you're doing with those interlopers, Xenos, etc. That's why even you've seen like the Order versus Disorder campaigns, or which kind of
Yes.
work. That's more or less how like the Dawn of War video games work.
Yeah.
And in the case of Age of Sigmar, you've got your like grand alliances, so there's a little bit more in there. But yeah, it's a tough
sell
balancing
narratively.
act. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad you knew that. I'm glad it wasn't just me. Like, I remember talking to the author of that book and being like, so why Dark Eldar? He's like, oh, let me tell you. Phil wanted to play Dark Eldar. You just painted up an army. I'm like, oh, okay. Got it.
Yep.
And then you ever had a problem with the campaign being a little over ambitious?
The level of my own enthusiasm for a campaign is inversely proportional to how long it takes the organizer to explain it to me. Because when they're like, all right, we're going to do a campaign. Okay. It's going to be Imperium versus Chaos. Tight. It's going to be over these planets. All right. There's a map campaign. Okay. And each planet, each hex is going to have different abilities that influence the battles. All right. And each week we have to make campaign moves, which are different than attack moves. Like, okay, we're playing a board game now too. Got it. Oh, and there's also going to be advancements. And mercenaries. Oh, you don't say. Like, the more of these things get layered on.
And you can play Battlefleet Gothic.
Oh, yeah. You can also, there's going to be Battlefleet Gothic integration for a boarding action game. And at the ground level, there's going to be kill team games that are going to be run on the side, which influence the stuff, yada, yada, yada. Like, all that stuff is so cool on paper. And unless you have people who are very good at running it, like the Nova Narrative crew, especially the old Philadelphia Nova Narrative crew, were very good at running this sort of thing. Like, unless you've got a literal team of people to run this sort of thing in a controlled environment, it's going to fall apart.
You're taking too big a bite.
Yeah.
I remember reading in Dragon Magazine one time an article, this huge article about these guys who were playing a Battletech like Inner Sphere game. And they had like the huge map with like all the worlds on it and push pins for every world that was owned by each faction. And they described how they were playing Battletech games and basically taking over worlds and blah, blah, blah. And it was this incredibly inspiring article. And then like a few months later, there's a Dragon Magazine article. They're like, so how's that Battletech campaign going? Yeah, that thing died. Like, no way. It was way too ambitious. I love the concept. Love it. The reality is, you're overthinking things quite a bit. Quite a bit.
Yeah.
If the mechanics are, like you just absolutely nailed it. Like every layer of mechanics, you're like, okay, and then what?
Yeah. Think of each layer of complexity you're adding, I feel like is an extra like 25% chance that people are not going to stick around.
Oh, that's an interesting math.
Maybe that math is high, maybe it's low, but it's going to add like greater chances of people not sticking around or not caring, because there is a point where people just, I can't remember all the stuff that's going on, and
I just want to play a game.
I just want to play a game, and that's actually a problem I've even run into on my side, where like the Nova Narrative, I was like in it, I was in every game, so I had all the enhancements and so on, and I was like somewhat invested in the story, and I was playing against like a night fight person who's coming in for one game. And I'm like, cool. So I know what's going on, and I essentially have 200 points of stuff over you. Sorry. And we're coming here with different expectations as a result. So it's hard. It's so cool. It's so cool, but it's hard.
It is hard. And I mean, not to mention again, but that conversation that you and Dan had about narrative play versus competitive play really spoke to me like on a grander scheme, meaning I still love narrative play. And you guys, I think the conclusion you were kind of coming to at one point is it's better off done at home, kind of with small groups that understand or on the same page. And I could relate, because going to the narrative, playing the narrative event up in Washington there, it's like I rocked in and I was like, okay, I'm here to play this. And then like, I see like these lists that are clearly power lists. And I'm like, I have misread the room. My idea of narrative was not this. Okay, cool. Fortunately I was able to like kind of pivot and adjust and then punch some people in the face, metaphorically speaking, like on the table. But I walked away from there going, okay, this was not what I thought it was. And that's, quite frankly, that was my fault, not their fault. Like, they were all having fun. Honestly, I had fun. It just wasn't what I was expecting. So anyway, off topic a little bit there. But your point is well made. Like the more complex the thing gets, the more likely it is to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting because it has to have a certain level of complexity to be another thing, but you got to really think about what choices you're making.
Good game design is what can I strip away to make this still fun, not what can I add on to make this more interesting. Like
40K has been a good example of that.
For sure. Like,
yeah, that's an interesting point.
Listen to like any interview with Jervis Johnson or whatever, he will say that pretty much verbatim. And I do believe the man. He's pretty good at making games. Just hot take, I know. But yeah, the more stuff you add in there, more is not always better.
Right. There's the next point I have here is imbalanced player experiences. And the first one is snowball effect. Often what happens in a campaign is, if you win, you get this thing, which now makes you a bit better. Mm-hmm. And the mistake people often make is if you lose, you don't get anything, or you get so much less it's irrelevant. And what can end up happening is you get a player that just runs away. This happens in Necromunda. It happens in Mordheim.
This is literally the game Talisman.
There you go.
Every single game of Talisman is this.
Which is super luck either way.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Roll a die and move. Mm-hmm. But when that occurs, it's almost like I used to play Call of Duty Modern Warfare a lot. Mm-hmm. One of the things that you would have in there is like kill streaks, right? If you were getting if you got 5 kills, you got this thing. If you got 10 kills in a row without dying, you get this thing. I mean, it got to a point where it's like, you're calling planes that are flying over, dropping bombs on the enemy because you got X amount of kills. Well, if I'm getting 10 kills and now I get another 10 because I just bombed the enemy, it's like, as soon as one side starts to gain an advantage, it would just snowball and roll downhill, and that's the end of the game. And it ceases to be fun for the people that are just like spawning and dying over and over again. Hence, ceases to be fun rocking up to a game and you're playing against an opponent that has 200 more points than you because they've won these things, and you're like, and there's no balancing factor brought into play there.
Yeah, it's definitely a rich get richer situation.
Yeah.
And if you're already a good player and you win, and now you get more stuff, you get to win harder in your next game.
Exactly.
And onwards and onwards, which sucks because getting those kill streaks felt so good. Leveling up your dudes in Necromunda feels awesome. But the thing is, when you level up in like D&D or a video game, you're usually just against the computer, or you're in a matchmaking thing where you're against people who are the same level as you. So there is that balancing, or who cares about balance that much? You're against a CPU, or you're against some NPC goblins, doesn't matter. But when you're against other human beings, that imbalance can feel pretty bad, especially for, again, the people getting airstruck and dunked on in general.
Yeah, exactly. And that was my next thing, a skill disparity. I mean, look, in our group, Justin is one of the strongest players. Does he play well in a tournament environment at Adepticon? That's that's a topic for another episode. But amongst our small pond, Justin is absolutely one of the stronger players. Cheyenne as well is one of the stronger players. Our friend Travis keeps saying, I swear to God, I just want to beat Cheyenne once. And so in a situation like that, these players can come in and tend to dominate. And as you said, that also becomes, now they get the bonus things, and then it runs out of control quickly. So differing skill player level can be discouraging and lead to disappointing results, and kind of, makes other players feel like, what's the point? There's no point in catching up, especially if it's some kind of team event where it's like, this team is the Tyranids and this team is the Imperial Guard. It's like, both of our best players are on the Imperial Guard side.
Yeah.
So you got to take those into account, and then inherent strengths, or certain factions are going to be stronger than others. Again, my Tyranid example is a good one in this case, where it's like, in hindsight, we did it, of course, just as the Tyranid Codex came out, so we had no idea. And then the Tyranid Codex came out, and we were like, well, let's play anyway. We probably should have made some adjustments in balancing the campaign a little bit.
Yeah, in cases like that, again, that was a different time, but in cases like now where there are those very obvious imbalances, that conclusion is kind of set in stone
Yeah.
when you start that campaign. Unless it is like, oh, our narrative is that chaos sucks and is going to get beat up for 6 weeks, which probably isn't going to be satisfying for anyone involved. Chaos is actually very good these days, but that's just my example.
I'm so happy I'm playing Chaos right now.
Yeah, you're in a good place.
I love it. It's been a long time coming.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time coming. I think let's take a short detour here.
Of course.
I think that the Chaos Space Marine Codex right now, and Chaos in general. So you got World Eaters and Thousand Suns and whatnot, Chaos Knights. When you look at that all in its whole, it's about as close as it's ever been to like the fabled 3.5 Chaos Codex. Like you can put marks on things. You can, there's so much variety and so many ways to play it. It's so interesting right now.
Yeah.
Shell and I had been playing primarily the, what's the formation? The Veterans of the Long War.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, wait a minute, we get access to these other things if we take the Zealots of formation, and it's still kind of in keeping with what we're doing thematically, but you also get to reroll all ones as opposed to, picking a unit and then saying that's the hated unit this round. Let's try that and play around with that for a bit. So we've been kind of changing it up and seeing the different effects that it's had for us. And it's been really fascinating. So it's in such a good place, man.
It's great. It's a good book. Their points are really nice these days. They just got some nice cuts to a lot of stuff while Cultist Jail has been dismantled, fortunately. That's not a fun list to play against. But I think that Chaos is in a very good place.
I'll be honest, it's honestly the list I am least interested in playing too.
It sucks to play against. It doesn't seem that fun to play either. But yeah, Chaos is in a great place. They got so many options. I feel that, you're right. It is like return to 3.5, but it's spread out across more books. Yeah, but in so doing, fun. Each one's more fleshed out.
Yeah,
which is really cool.
And now with the hints towards Emperor's Children, man, I cannot wait to see how that. I'm not even Emperor's Children fan. Like, I'm not going to go that route, but I'm curious, very curious to see what they do. So
yeah,
okay,
it's gonna be cool.
Back on topic. Last point I want to make is all around organizational challenges. So we talked about this a little earlier, but like unclear rules or scenarios, you got to make sure all that stuff is buttoned up pretty tight. Often people want to create their own battles and that kind of thing in specific scenarios. I would argue that there are so many references out there and types of battles that you can just probably lift something that's kind of been play tested already, and then put a new veneer on it so that it fits your theme that you're going with. But there's a lot of resources out there along with the cards and whatnot that you can just plagiarize from there and go that route.
I'd never say don't write them. Like, just as a writing exercise, write rules, write scenarios. That's cool. That's awesome. That's fun. That's how everyone who does this for a living got their start, is by doing it for fun. But writing rules is a skill, and everyone that thinks they can do it should try doing it and then play testing it and seeing how many holes there are in the things they write. If nothing else, just as like an exercise. In our last narrative event here, we had a bunch of things that weren't really play tested. Like, one of the enhancements, the campaign enhancements, was a unit gets to shoot twice, once per game. Well, that went on a unit of Havocs that were just shooting 8 las cannon shots on the first turn, making everything go away. Which was absolutely, it was
holy
miserable.
Smokes.
And they had all the buffs and bonuses going on too. And it was like, oh, didn't think about this one, did you? I had my Redemptor Dreadnought with his plasma cannon. Of course I took that upgrade. Why wouldn't I? Oh yeah, he just got like 14 shots with that big cannon and a bunch of squads of elite dudes who
it's incredible.
weren't there anymore.
It's incredible how a small change, what seems like a small change, can suddenly just throw things out of whack. And
it's a house of cards.
I'm absolutely with you. Like, when people are like, oh, these rules suck, I'm all, you ever write rules? Like, yeah, but they're paid to do it. They should do it better. I agree with you there. But I also acknowledge that it is very difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult,
It's
let alone to get people to read them. I'm so sorry I didn't watch your videos, Josh.
it's that mix of technical writing and creativity that is very challenging.
Oh,
Like,
that's an interesting point, that technical writing really does play a part in it.
well, some people, I definitely, I saw some complaints like internally at Goonhammer when we were talking about the new D&D rulebook. And we're talking about campaigns. D&D is definitely on the table here. They were like, the writing here is so clinical. Oh yeah, I have. Oh, I got the collector's edition.
Of course you did.
But they were complaining about the writing being too technical, because in the old ones it would be like, you'd read the rule for like lightning bolt or whatever, and it would just say an explosion fizzles from your fingers and your enemy tries to dodge, and if they fail they take this much damage as their bones are charred.
I already know where this argument's going.
Yeah, which is so fun. That is fun. I'm not going to say it's not. And now it just says lightning bolt, range 30 meters, on a failed dexterity saving throw, they take 46 damage.
Yeah.
And it maybe it'll have like a flavor text.
As a little bit of flavor text, like,
but then it has that.
If a lightning bolt is fired in this, spread and blah, blah, blah.
And like, I love the former. The former is fun. The former is cool. The former is imaginative, but doesn't make it easy to reference on the fly.
Yeah.
It makes it kind of hard to lodge in your brain. Writing clearly is very different from writing creatively. Like, I was reading the 6th edition Warhammer Fantasy rulebook for fun, just because I like reading old rulebooks. And it just says, like, on the rule for cannon, it just says, like, the cannon goes kaboom, and with an exclamation point, and fires 48 inches or whatever. And if there's an exclamation point in your rules writing, like, it's not good rules writing.
Yeah, that's probably true.
It's too expressive for this sort of thing. And
it's probably true.
I love this stuff. It's what I was raised on, but it is so hard to internalize when it's a mix of narrative and technical writing at the same time.
Yeah.
So
unless those are completely separate paragraphs.
Yes. Right? Like
here's the narrative description.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here's the actual rules and what happened.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason I like on every rule in the 40K app now at the bottom, you've got your like lore thing that says all the things about what they are, what they do, what this thing does, and all that. And that's great. That's awesome. Let your names be expressive. Let your lore explanations be distinct and separated, but you've got to keep your rules pretty tight and easy to understand.
Campbell, I know people hate hearing about like Dungeons and Dragons characters and this kind of thing. But let me
tell you about my guy.
Let me tell you about my guy. Let me what's the word? Let me bathe in this pond for a moment. So I was playing a fairly high level elf wizard at one point, and this, I think, is the 2nd edition. Lightning bolt in the rules would fire and then reflect off of a hard surface back until it reached its entire length. We were in this forest and we got attacked by these like treants, and I lined myself up, with 2 treants, and I started the lightning bolt between the 2 treants, and it bounced back and forth between the treants until it killed them. And I was like, I'm explaining to the DM what I'm gonna do. And I'm like, so according to the rules, I was like, let me push up my glasses here. This should bounce back and forth. They were just like, yeah, sure it does. Like, whatever. It wasn't that important, but I was so excited about it.
That rules.
Okay, and the last thing I have here is Game Master GM overload. It can herding cats is exhausting. This is why I apologize so readily and often to Josh for not reviewing the material he sent out before the campaign. Like, I have no excuse. I am that gamer in this particular case. And I know how frustrating it is for Josh, because I have run events too where I've written reams of instructions or narrative and nobody reads it, and you're like, why did I do this if you guys are not going to participate? Right. And that's why I felt so awful about it. And I was like, hang on, I'm going to go watch this right now. It is exhausting. It is thankless. You have to have a passion for it, that you want to organize these things and are willing to put up with that. But even then it can be exhausting.
Yeah. And I find the more successful campaigns I've played in have been ones where the GM had a light touch. So they weren't overloading themselves. They weren't making this a part-time or, God forbid, full-time job while they were trying to wrangle a bunch of yabos trying to play Warhammer or whatever. You've, again, part of, as much as like the overambition earlier can put off players because of how complex it is, that will come back to you, the organizer, and understand that all the work you are doing is going to come back at you. That's not saying the appreciation is going to necessarily come back. Your work is going to come back at you like that lightning bolt bouncing between those trees.
Everything that you complicate, you got to remember you're going to answer questions about. Constant questions about it. Oh, well, wait, can I get this then? Can I get that? Well, according to the way I've written it, yeah, but So, yeah, you're absolutely right. I love the way you put that. Especially, I love the reference to my lightning bolt story.
That spell is responsible for at least a few party wipes in the first 2 Baldur's Gates for me. So
it's so good.
Seared into my brain.
I love it. All right, let's do this. Let's take a break. We're going to come back, and then we'll talk about some solutions to some of these problems and ways you can kind of address these before even really going down the wrong path. So we'll be right back. All right, we're back, and enough of the what goes wrong. Let's talk about solutions to prevent campaign failure at this point. So planning and setting realistic expectations. We've been kind of sprinkling this in throughout all the negative. It's hard. It's very hard for me, Campbell, to talk about like all these negative things without immediately trying to go to solutions. I think this is one thing that drives my wife nuts.
It's hard to silo away my emotions like that. So yeah, note that for everything where I'm like, this thing sucks and is the worst thing ever. Oh, well, this thing's cool though. And even if that cool thing we peppered in there was your character casting lightning bolt, it's still, it
was totally cool.
I believe you. It's hard to stay mired down in there. But yeah, we're keeping it posy. We're going into the good stuff you can do.
Okay. So pre-campaign communication. This is not just like telling everybody, oh, well, here's all the rules and let me send out a video. I'm so sorry, Josh. and here, please go read this packet, because nobody will do that. But it's also ensuring everybody understands the time commitment that they're signing up for. Hey, this thing is going to run 8 weeks. You're expected to play at least 1 game a week. If you cannot commit to that, please do not join the campaign. You could join the next one, or if you can't commit to 7 out of 8 of those weeks,
right?
Don't join, and of course people get sick or something happens, but
right.
If you don't take a hard line on that kind of thing and don't like tell everybody like, here's what we're expecting of you. Can you commit to that? And don't be afraid for people to say, no, I can't do that. Okay, fine. Or enough people to say, no, I can't do it, that the campaign doesn't even launch. I'd rather have a campaign not launch than fizzle.
Yeah, I think that is a very good way to look at it. Now, the thing is, I kind of have an anecdote from one of my more recent experiences. So we were running a competitive league last winter, I think, and my buddy Michael was running it, and he sent out the campaign pack. No one read it. No one read it. No one's ever read the campaign packs, except for like 3 people. And I know this because when we did the awards ceremony on the last day, all games were done, he says, you may have noticed that a few of you changed your profile pictures on Discord to a picture of Sanguinius. To each of you, thank you for reading the campaign packet. You each get an additional 10 points.
Dude, it was the Van Halen concert approach. It was the green M&Ms in the bowl. Do you know this story?
I don't think I do.
So Van Halen used to put out this rider, right? Of like, here's everything that has to happen when we're going to come play at your venue. And within that rider was, we want a bowl of M&Ms on the table with no green M&Ms in it. And people thought of them as like prima donnas and stuff. But the reason they did it was because at the time that they were playing on stages and stuff, their electrical setups and everything were so complicated and beyond what people had been doing that it could be dangerous if people didn't follow the exact information that they were given. And so one of the things they had was if they didn't have green M&Ms in this thing, they knew they could walk in, see that there were no M&Ms or green M&Ms in there, and be like, they have not read the entire thing. And then they trash the room.
Well, yeah, about to say, it's Van Halen in the 80s. There's definitely a part 2 there.
Right. But that was the whole thinking. So that's actually incredibly smart.
Yeah,
I like that.
I'm going to read the packet this time, Kriegsy, if you're listening. Just letting you know.
Oh, heck, I'd read that too. Oh, I love that. That's a brilliant idea.
Which I also do like because it's rewarding attentiveness, but not penalizing not being attentive.
Yes.
Positive reinforcement. It works for people. It works for dogs. Works for everybody.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah. And so then you also want to set simple and achievable goals right off the bat, right? Mm-hmm. Especially if you guys aren't regularly running campaigns or irregularly running them. Like, do it simple. Like, don't overextend yourself. Like, start with, hey, here's the start date. Here's the end date. It will end at this point, whether you've played your games or not. Here, if you do something overly complex, it's just not gonna be a good time. If your initial one goes smooth and everybody has it, and then a couple weeks later, months later, they're like, let's do another one, let's add a little layer of complication, and everybody's on board with that, fine. But as you said earlier, the more complication you add, the increased reliability of it failing. It's inversely
just pays
proportionate to how it's going to fail.
Pays negative dividends. So this is kind of where I really like pre-made campaign books, whether that is your old Imperial Armors or your D&D pre-made campaigns or anything of the sort, is they give you an endpoint. Like right now, my D&D group is playing Descent into Avernus, and when that's over, and we can we'll be able to be like, okay, let's
take a break,
keep playing together, keep playing with these characters. Maybe like having that endpoint gives people the organic place where it's an organic off ramp. And that means you're not going to fizzle out because you have these sorts of things. Now, things can still happen. The best laid plans of Mice and Men and all that. I started a Necromunda campaign in February 2020. You'll never guess how that went. But
still going.
yeah, right. The Necrofunda Slampaign. Here we go. But yeah, like having those organic drop-off points is very good for anything. Yeah. Again, it's like I think there's also like campaign seasons will sometimes be in some campaigns where it's like, I think Necromunda does this, where it'll have like your campaign has like a seasonal arc essentially of 4 weeks or whatever, and then your next 4 weeks start, and people can kind of come and go over those and come back in. I think having those off ramps is important.
Yeah. One of the things I love about the Orpheus campaign system, or it then translated into some of the like Dark Age campaign system and Horus Heresy and all that, was it seems complex initially, but it's really like super simple. And the great thing about it is, they're very adamant about like set an end date. 8 weeks, you should play a game a week if you can. The more games you play, the more points you score. Either way, you can play any game. You can play Battlefleet Gothic. You can play all these things. They all count the same. You just track who won and who lost, and then these points get applied. So like you could play a kill team game. It's meant to represent like, this, super important special forces type of situation where these guys are going in to detonate, the power grid or something. Yeah. I don't know, making stuff up as I go.
Yeah.
But that can have just as much weight as like these two armies conflicting on the table. Right. So it's a very interesting system that works very well and can be kind of tuned to whatever thing you like, but it has so much flexibility to it and ease of use that once you understand it, you're like, oh yeah, this is pretty straightforward.
I think that's one of the reasons, one thing I like about pre-Crusade campaigns, because Crusade, I've fetched about it no small amount, but I do think there's some very cool things about it. Yeah. But it locks you into that game, that system, that army, etc. While, yeah, if you're just doing kind of a more general campaign, like maybe that you would if you don't have a game-specific advancement track, you can do that sort of thing.
Yep.
And I love that. I like that. That's better for players, because it might be hard for me to get to the game store for 3 hours for a game this week, but I can hop on and do a Dawn of War game with you or whatever, or have you over for an hour for a Kill Team game.
Yeah, that's the very interesting thing. Like that, it could even translate to a video game, right? We play. Yeah, it was such a fantastic. It was one of the things I raved about when it came out, was that all up until that point, like most of the Imperial Armor books had been, oh, you have these armies and here's their list and this is what they fought and this is how the whole thing wound up at the end. Fall of Orpheus was like, all this stuff goes wrong and there's this huge Necron incursion here and everything, you can't tell what's going on, and then now it's up to you to decide how it ends. And it's like, oh, that's sweet, like that's really like, cool, all right, so here's how you play the campaign, and then it's like, oh, well, we could just, the Tyranids are the bad guys, or the Eldar, I mean, you could make up all kinds of different, it's worked so well. So highly recommend looking into those if you can find them. Sorry, go ahead.
Most Goonhammer narrative scenarios and things are just lifted from old narrative things.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of stuff
Why
out there.
not?
It's out there. And if it's written to be fairly game agnostic like that, it'll totally work for 10th.
One of the things I loved in, what was that game? Dropship Commander. You ever play that?
I never played it, but I've seen it played.
One of the things I loved in it was like, there was this mechanic where it was like, you drop guys off to go into a building to search for like the objectives, and then like you roll a die, and each round they're in the building, trying to find the objective. So you had like this variable length of time that the people were trying to, locate the objective in each building until they could come out and get back in the ship. And I was just like, oh, what an interesting mechanic that was. Like, I don't know why I got on that topic, other than stealing stuff from, from other games is an interesting idea.
That just made me think of this old, I don't even remember the name of it, but it was a 40K pamphlet size codex. So 3rd edition, that the whole deal was when you do a boarding action in Battlefleet Gothic, instead of just like rolling a die or whatever, you play one of these games.
Right.
Which, again, we were talking earlier about the overambitious, it's going to involve every system sort of thing. And it absolutely is that. Because if you're playing a BFG game and you have a sideboard for playing a 40K game, in case you do a boarding action, that's
but it sounds bananas. On paper amazing.
So cool.
It sounds amazing. Right. I've been talking for the last few episodes about wanting to run like this big game where it's like thematically chaos versus somebody else. And I'm still thinking about how to put it together and all this. But, again, even just a one-day event like that is going to require a bit of planning and, who's going to be involved and et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah. But no, that sounds amazing. Like I would love to do that. And actually, Colin, who used to be part of our group, he and I played a game of Death Guard versus Adeptus Mechanicus for a while, and we did a thing where we had like you go into these buildings and then there's the Zone Mortalis terrain, and we would go over to that and play, and we did like a series of 3 of those. It was some of the best games we ever played, but it does require a bunch of effort and people ready to do it, right? So, oh man, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, I'm so excited for these things I've never done right now.
Maybe we should do an episode where it's like things that sounded good and how did it actually go? Balance. Flexible scheduling. I didn't talk about this. So you can use scheduling tools for this kind of thing. You can create a Google Calendar that everybody's a part of so that you can, set yourself up appropriately for when you can actually play. But being able to be flexible, and again, I'm going to go back to that campaign system. One of the nice things about it was, points got totaled towards the end of every week, and that was that. You either played games or you didn't, and that was that. It's super flexible. So you had plenty of time to arrange with somebody else as to when we could get together and play a game. Having a regular play place would also be super helpful.
Yeah, that's why having a local game store that's amenable to it, like that's always great. I love mine. Modern Games, shout out for being such a great place to play.
What's it called?
Modern Games.
Modern Games.
Here-
Send me the link to it.
Yeah, here in Bend, Oregon, it is a beautiful little store. But that's our regular meeting place. But back in the day, we used to meet at a Fraternal Order of the Eagles Hall with Dorka Morka because that was our regular meeting place. Sometimes you have a friend who has a place that people meet at, but having those specific meeting places, neutral ground, is very good, especially when you're coordinating people who don't know each other that well.
Yeah.
Because there's people in my group who I love to death. If they needed to shack up in my house for like 2 weeks, I'd let them. There's other people who I don't know them that well. I don't know if I want them in my house.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're allergic to my cats. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons it's good to have a neutral space. And
for sure.
that are way beyond just this. So
For sure.
having a good meeting place that's open is very good for scheduling.
Well, listen, you can always stay here, and I know I can trust you because when we were in Europe and I dropped my wallet on the bus, you were able to quickly snatch it and be like, Carl, you dropped this, you idiot.
Yeah, and I didn't even take a single pound note out of there.
That would have been a disaster.
Yeah, that would have been bad.
All right. Balance and engagement strategies, meaning like we talked about runaway players because of benefits they get for winning, that kind of thing. You have to have, I feel like, some kind of progression cap or limit on these things, or balancing factor, a way that, so like this can take a cap in terms of like, you can only achieve X amount of these and like never more than that many, regardless of how you can only get so many widgets, and you're not able to get more unless somebody catches up closer or something to that effect. Or maybe even handicaps can get applied if you have somebody that's just, look, we acknowledge you are the best player in the group. Everybody will give you a patch.
Yeah, you're gonna win, but we want everyone to get a chance at least
and have a good time. Think of how much cooler you are if you beat us 1,500 points to 2,000.
True. So there's a thing in the new D&D where it has has some worksheets in there, and one of them is basically like by level 4 your party should have X number of magic items. By level 6 they should have Y numbers of magic items. So there's things like that. And I feel like having those sorts of milestones set might be useful. So if you're like, by week 4, no one in this game can be over level 3. Yeah. Or no one can have more than 2 enhancements. I don't know the parlance.
Whatever the
nowadays.
parlance is,
but yeah. Or you can't have gotten more than this much. You hit a cap. And having those sort of things in place might not stop somebody. Because maybe someone will be able to game the system and max out in a game or two. But it means they won't be able to just keep running away with it forever. And it means people have kind of a chance to kind of catch up a bit. Yeah. I also think that having things where you can kind of gracefully let that overpowered army, whatever, out is nice. So there is the common way this happens is usually people just go like, okay, the top 2 players, they just keep playing each other for a while and they become their own problem. That's just Godzilla and King Kong fighting in the corner while everyone else runs around the bottom. But there was a White Dwarf mission a few years ago for Necromunda, and the whole notion was there was a Goliath gang that was like runaway good. All the level ups, all the cool gear, all the skills, all the stuff. And everyone else in the campaign had been left in the dust. So that Goliath gang had gotten the notice of Lord Helmar and the opportunity to leave the hive. But to do that, they had to get to a shuttle and take off. And in their way is every one of the gangs that they've been stomping on this whole time. So if you're the Goliath player, you're like, okay, cool. This is my victory lap. I get to go out in a blaze of glory.
Dude, that is actually a really great narrative exit.
Yeah. And for everybody else, it's like, oh, this is our chance to finally, show these guys
kick
who's
him
boss.
in the butt in the door on the way out.
Yeah, don't let the doorknob hit you on the way out. And I that's not going to work for every system, obviously, but I thought that was so cool and so fun.
Is super cool and clever.
And very clever. And again, it's like being told you're too good, you can't play, sucks. Being forced to play the other player who's like number 2 behind you might not be fun either. But this sort of thing where you've got like a narrative, like everyone sort of gets to win situation.
Yeah.
And the thing is,
and then you start over with a new gang while everybody else is a little more advanced.
And that was the thing. The next season, because it was doing like the Necromunda campaign seasons, they'd start with a new gang and some of the other gangs would carry stuff over. So I think having sort of thinking up ways to have people leave a campaign in a narratively satisfying way takes work for sure, but can be very cool.
Yeah, I mean, another option too is they achieve victory of a certain amount of points. Those points get wiped. They lose whatever benefits come along with those said things, but they get something real world, whether it's a pin or, a cool, homemade purity seal or, whatever, there's actual physical in-person, like little bennies that you get that you can, attach to your tableware case or your KR backpack or whatever the case may be. That kind of sticks with you, and you're like, oh, yeah, but I got this cool thing and I got 5 of them because I kicked everybody's butt over and over again, but I think those are other options as well. Right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I also like the opportunities to catch up or otherwise lift yourself up if you're kind of behind.
Yes.
So like old Necromunda had this great mechanic called Giant Killer, where if a gang with a lower value at a certain point, if they for every, let's say you get 5 experience points for killing a ganger. Well, if you kill a ganger in a gang that's this much better than yours, you get 7 experience or whatever. Or instead of getting 2d6 credits at the end, you get 4d6 credits. Like you get bigger benefits for, if not necessarily winning, just doing stuff.
Right.
And I joined an in-progress Necromunda campaign and had, a base starting gang value Goliath gang, and I got wicked lucky and pulled out a win in that first game. And it got me not quite to the level of everybody else, but to a level where I could play pretty reasonably with everybody else.
Yeah.
And having those catch-up mechanics is really good, especially if you're having players come in late into a campaign.
That is a great point. And I think that Crusade has a mechanic called I think it's Crusade that has the underdog mechanic, or that may be in Age
of Sigmar has an underdog mechanic.
Yeah.
But I imagine that term probably gets used in a lot of things.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea where, if they're over by X amount of points, you get some benefit that helps you out. I think that's absolutely reasonable. Or you get additional money to hire a mercenary or, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, because if you're up against this other badass army with this renowned, leader who the whole galaxy wants dead, you're going to get a bounty hunter to help you out. Or command might be like, oh, these guys, you need some more command points to mess with this game because you've got to deal with this big threat. So there's a lot of levers you can pull that aren't just one side gets more points or whatever. It could be handing out a special rule. It could be handing out command points or extra characters. Or there's a lot of cool stuff you can hand out that isn't just, again, one gets 1,200 more points or whatever.
Yeah. And this one we kind of touched on already, which was balanced scenarios and storylines. Like, again, when we were talking negative about stuff, it's very hard for us not to interject here, but there's, you want to make sure everybody gets their moment in the sun, right? And that they're, even if they're on the losing side, they're getting to do some interesting stuff. In particular, this is one of the things I really like about Adeptus Titanicus. Even when you're losing, like you're having fun because, my Titan detonates. Oh, look, you're within range of that detonation. Let's see what happens. Oh, did you explode too? That's funny. Like it's half the fun of that game is just watching Titans explode and seeing the results of it. So, making sure that even to my point is, even when you're losing in that game, it doesn't feel like you're losing in that game. Like it's pretty exciting to watch. And so you want to make sure if you're creating some kind of narrative, especially if it's story driven, that even the Dark Elder who showed up and aren't part of the Chaos and Imperial Guard game should get some type of moment in the spotlight, even if it didn't fit what your original narrative was intended to be.
Yeah, things are going to have to change to suit your players. It is what it is. You can't control them. Do not try to. You fool. You arrogant fool. But I think when it comes to the idea of balanced scenarios, I like that on paper, but it's narrative. It doesn't have to be balanced.
This is true too.
Because you might, even if it's a game where you don't have advancement, you don't have experience points, it's just basically 2 people with match play armies. You might be like, okay, well, in this mission this week, our best player and our least practiced player against each other. Well,
Yeah.
is there a mission I can come up with or find where that best player will be at a disadvantage? Like they might be stuck deploying in the center in a battle pile while player 2 gets like endlessly respawn their stuff, and it becomes that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And again, communicate this with your players ahead of time. And if it's a narrative, you should also communicate that ahead of time. That's not just going to be matched play games or whatever.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, different objectives entirely could be the thing, right? Yeah. Okay. I may lose, but if I'm able to hold him off for 3 rounds from this thing, then I'm achieving, I get victory points even for losing. One game that does this very well, and it's not a miniatures game. It's actually a living card game, which is the Arkham Horror living card game. And Shell and I play it a lot. Like I probably have $1,000 worth of these stupid cards at this point. But it's so interesting because you're playing campaigns, and I've never seen a game before that takes cards and then you have like entirely different mechanics to each scenario. Like they just work so differently from each other that you're like, is this the same game that I was playing? But fundamentally, the core rules are the same. But because it's a Cthulhu themed game, and it is incredibly hard, like Shell and I play on easy mode and get our butts handed to us all the time. I do not know how people play this game in hard mode. But as the campaign progresses, there is losing a scenario doesn't mean you've lost the campaign. Like what happens is it says, okay, if this happened, if you achieve this level of unsuccess, this happens. If you achieve this level, this happens. If you achieve this level, this happens. And it's not always mechanically negative to you, though there's usually probably a little bit like there's incentive to certainly have done better, but there is narratively the direction of the story changes. So sometimes, just the fact that you lose a game could just change the direction of the story as opposed to, the outcome you were expecting, or you lose points or what have you. So sometimes it could just be as simple as a change of direction of the narrative as opposed to points being gained by something.
I like that.
It's a fantastic game, by the way. It's absolutely. And if you're looking at getting into it, just for everybody out there, like now is the kind of time to do it because the way they release the sets now is so much better than they used to release them. So it used to be like it would come out and you'd have to find each pack for the season. Now it's just like they release the whole season in one box, and you buy the characters and then the season, and the characters can be used across any season. It's pretty awesome.
Sweet.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about all that. We talked about balance, keeping players engaged. And I was just touching on this, like side objectives, like, maybe you can create objectives that reward players that have fallen behind, in points that give them kind of a leg up. So regardless of them losing particular games, maybe they can, by the way, I'm going to give you this secret objective in this mission. And if you can achieve that objective, regardless of the outcome of the game, you're going to gain X, right? So that may even change their focus in that game. And we often talk about even tournament games where you're getting your butt handed to you, and it's like, all right, well, I need to change. Like, what am I getting out of this game at this point? I played in that narrative game up in Tacoma. And like I said, this guy rocked up with a brass scorpion at 1,500 points or 1,000 point games at a brass scorpion. And I was like, oh, and this was 4 rounds into the thing. He'd put all his points that he'd gained into that brass scorpion. So here you have this like massively powerful unit. And I'm like, cool. And so my objective became win or lose, I'm destroying this brass scorpion.
Yeah.
and
moral
I did.
Victory. Yeah.
And then I pretty much wiped everything he had off the table except for like one unit. It was awesome when I tank shocked a bunch of cultists with a rhino and killed like the rest of them. But by that point, I was so far behind on points it didn't matter. But I was like, but I'm gonna bloody his nose before I go down, because he's gonna roll for every one of those units to see if they took damage.
I played a chaos guy at Storm of Silence who he had an Iron Warriors army, and he was like, I'm not gonna let you table me. I'm gonna table me. So he did dark packs and hazardous weapons on every single opportunity he could, and he did table himself at the end because that was his like new victory condition for himself. So there was a point where his not the tech marine, the the Chaos Techmarine armor, they're
Yeah,
called Warpsmith.
Warpsmith, yeah.
Overwatched with the plasma pistol, and he's like, and I'm overcharging, and I'm dark pacting, or whatever.
You're
I'm
damn
like,
right I
go
am.
for it, dog. That guy ruled.
Shell's the queen of dark pack. Like,
Never not be dark
I
pacting.
will forget sometimes, and she never forgets the dark pack.
So my buddy Peter Peter Dolan, he's a listener, shout out to you, Peter, I love you. He doesn't say, are you firing your plasma gun, or are you overcharging it, or firing it standard? He says, are you shooting your plasma gun, or are you undercharging it?
I love that attitude.
Never not be overcharging.
That's amazing. Oh yeah,
that's a personal philosophy, even as a competitive player. Never not be overcharging.
Every time I look at the plasma, I'm like, okay, I don't want to risk overcharge. And then I look at the damage it does overcharge, and I'm like, yeah, I'm overcharging.
Yeah, unless I'm shooting Gretchen, I am going to be overcharging that.
I knew it when I took all those plasma guns in my Chaos Forces. I knew what I was doing. And it was worth it.
When it comes to like sub objectives, I think that the agendas in Crusade are a cool implementation of that idea. I don't think they're all created the same. I don't think they're all great, but I do think they are a cool way to do that, because you are kind of picking those personal secondaries that don't affect the game, but they do affect your army. And I think that's a cool way to do that sort of thing.
Right. I have here optional participation. Make sure players that miss games, allow them to miss games without feeling like they're falling too far behind, or possibly have catch-up sessions. This one I'm kind of on the fence of a little bit. Like, I feel like, speaking to the commitment thing at the beginning, it's like you should be like, we're going to do 8 weeks. You need to really commit to 7 weeks here, and look, somebody's going to miss it and only do 6 weeks. And you're like, okay, it's not the end of the world, but everybody going in with the understanding that this is the expectation. Don't participate if you can't. What I use Facebook events to organize a lot of things, as you know, because I see the event thing. And I think it's a great system. Like, it's one of the things, like, I would get rid of Facebook, quite frankly, if it weren't for the ICs group, and if it weren't for, like, it's the best way for us to set up events and stuff. But one thing I hate about it is that maybe button. Like, if I could have an option to remove maybe
button.
Yeah, if I had an option to remove maybe, to me a maybe is a no. And so, don't even, and my group knows I hate it. It's like, and so of course Lars will always hit maybe just to mess with me. But yeah, I mean, either commit or don't, and that's okay if you don't. It's okay if you can't. And again, I want to reiterate, like, if you're the organizer and enough people don't commit that you can do it, fine, don't do it. Maybe later is a better time to run it. Maybe the summer's better, where people have a little more freedom. Maybe winter's better. I don't know, but yeah, figure that out for yourself.
Yeah.
And then narrative focus, making sure the game is about telling a great story other than purely winning. I think this can appeal to players that are super into lore and that kind of thing. But let's face it, like, unless everybody, like a D&D game, unless everybody's on that same page, and it's so hard to do. Again, I'll reference your and Dan's conversation about competitive play versus narrative. Unless everybody's absolutely on the same page, that it doesn't matter. And you know what? I'm willing to play 500 points down, even half your army size for this particular scenario that we're setting up. I think that would be really fun. Or, you get endless waves of Tyranids or whatever the case may be. We'll see how long it can last. Unless everybody's on board with that, it's not going to typically work, I don't think. Especially in a game that's inherently competitive. The interesting thing is, like, comparing it to a Dungeons and Dragons campaign doesn't really do it justice, because that's a cooperative environment you are developing together. And what we're talking about is taking a inherently competitive game and putting it into a cooperative environment for the sake of telling a story. It's hard to do.
Yeah. It's not a full square peg into a round hole, but it does take some finagling to make it work. I guess square base into a round base, whatever.
It's that video of the girl that's like, yes, this goes in the square hole. Like, no.
I love the video so much.
It's my favorite. And she's done a few others since then too. But her reactions are just amazing.
Yeah, if you are doing that sort of like ongoing story thing, it is on the GM for summarizing that week's goings on into something resembling a story, which can be a challenge because that takes work, that takes time. And as I said, not everyone is a rules writer, not everyone is a narrative writer either.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be like, all right, I'm reading your fan fiction about my fan fiction right now. This
And you're a
isn't
king
for
of
this.
fan fiction, buddy.
I am a reluctant connoisseur of fan fiction. But yeah, not everyone is good at all these things. And you know what? That's okay. But I think about all those, again, White Dwarf campaigns.
Yeah.
Like, when your job was, if you're in the Games Workshop studio, you have your own like special talent pool. It's unbeatable. But they'd have like Town Crier. So they'd do like a week of Mordheim games, and then they'd have like a graphic designed up like ye olde pamphlet with all of the goings on and
Sick.
all the bounties and all that. And that's so cool. And if you're willing to do the work, you can make that cool too, but you've got to do the work. And
Yeah.
I think making people care about the narrative does require you to put in the work, because I'm not going to be bought in on someone's random narrative stuff. But when they have like a cool narrative pamphlet with like nicely laid out stuff in there, and there's like names are recognized and things, stakes and so on, like timelines, all that stuff is what makes me start to care.
Jason Mullins out in England used to play a lot of 30K. I think he's still playing 30K primarily. But there was a friend of ours, Pete. They called him Perfect Pete because the guy was like,
I met him.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you did.
I played 30K with him. That guy was great.
Pete got into running 30K events. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, I did see that.
His like insane 30K events where everybody got a data slate. He basically got a bunch of Kindles,
iPads.
Kindles.
Okay, yeah.
And he loaded onto the Kindle a PDF with all their instructions and stuff, and he'd hand them out to everybody. I'm like, oh, that's pretty sick.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that kind of thing goes like, if they say, picture paints 1,000 words, like that kind of thing is really representative of a cool part of the hobby. But you're right. It's going to take a tremendous amount of time and effort. And if you can get people to help develop that, you're that much better for it. But it also segues into kind of reducing the complexity, to make sure it's successful. You want to keep it simple, right? Mm-hmm. And simplified rules and campaign systems, like the easier it is to understand and the easier it is to just say, I won, I lost, it's black and white, or, there's a few shades of gray, but not 50 shades of gray. Right?
I mean, if that's the nature of your campaign, then, go off.
No judgment here.
Yeah. It's your hobby.
So did you say get off? No, you said go off. Oh, okay.
First one, then the other.
The less bookkeeping you have to do, the better. To that end, if you are going to do anything that has any kind of complexity, the more you can automate, the better. Google Forms. If you have any knowledge in Google spreadsheets and Google Forms, create a Google form. Each player goes and fills out the Google form. It feeds your spreadsheet. You're good. Yep. Right. The more you can simplify and kind of crowdsource the management of the campaign, the better.
I also think if you're going to have experience points, level ups, whatever, think about where they matter most and limit them to that. So one thing I love about modern Necromunda and Old Mordheim is your champions, your leaders, your like big characters, they get access to all the skills, all the stats, all the cool stuff, while your gangers, your henchmen, your just hired guns, they don't. They still have some advancement. It's very limited, but all the stuff you really need to think about and get like special rules for is just on those characters, because
it's just focused on those few, right?
Right. Because there's
interesting.
There's even like a note in the rules where it's like, these are like the stars of the show, and everyone else is the supporting cast. So you just focus on them. I think the Nova narrative last year and this year, what they've been doing is keeping the full Crusade rules, but only for 500 points of your army. So
interesting.
Yeah, your Terminators and your captain and your favorite dreadnought, they've got the whole gamut of things to keep track of, and everybody else is just supporting cast.
The ones that if it were a book, the book would be following.
Right, because your book is not about the third intercessor with a grenade launcher. The book is about the captain. The book is about maybe the lieutenant or the sergeant or the dreadnought. Your book isn't about...
That's where you're wrong. Fan fiction's about the third guy.
Fan fiction is also usually about Sonic the Hedgehog, but we'll get into that at a later date.
Yeah.
Sorry, Primarch Sonic the Hedgehog of the Ultra Hogs. The lost second Primarch.
And then guided campaigns. We've talked about using pre-built campaign supplements like those from Games Workshop.
Mhm.
Imperial Armor is no longer in publication, but I'm telling you right now, if you can get your hands on the Fall of Orpheus, you will see a fantastic campaign system in there that can be, you can change the paint job on it to match whatever you want, and it just simplified. It's super cool. You can play any game that counts towards it. You could almost flip a coin, in some of those games and be like, yes, heads, I won, I get the points. When you dumb it down that much, it obviously is silly, but the fact is you could play Battlefleet Gothic, you could play, as you and I said, Dawn of War, right? The video game, and see how it goes and make that the outcome of your scenario. Obviously, you want to probably put some constraints around that to keep it thematically cool, but it's such a great system. I honestly fell in love with it right away. And it doesn't, if I recall correctly, it doesn't do a lot of like advancement of various.
If you're that
forces.
sort of not, I won't say system neutral, but if you're that open-ended, you can't be that focused,
Yeah.
Because you can be like, all right, cool. In this battle, your opponent is under the effects of night fighting or whatever. That doesn't work if you're playing Battlefleet Gothic or Dawn of War. It only works if you're playing Warhammer 40,000 4th edition. Like, it can't be that specific.
Right.
I do think that campaign mechanics that are more general are going to be the way to go.
Yeah.
And if you do want to incorporate multiple game systems, think about how you were going to make that work. Think about what sort of effects things can have. Because, maybe in this game, whatever, it's a kill team game, nothing is different about it, but it's the battle for the loading mechanism of an anti-aircraft gun. So if you play a Battlefleet Gothic game, that takes this effect. Like, it's a lot of bookkeeping, it's a lot of thinking, but that's campaigns for you.
I so desperately want to play like a map campaign. I have a fully painted set of the Planetary Empires tiles. I have another box of unpainted Planetary Empires tiles, and then I have 2 boxes of the Fantasy Empires tiles that I'm just like, I really wish I could run something with these. Like, it's so cool. The original rules were not particularly great, but I think there's opportunity to use those tools and turn it into something that would be really, really fun for people. So
the closest I've gotten to being like Legions Imperialis pilled or whatever was seeing the 30K group at Adepticon with their map campaign, and it had like the map there, the little flags moving around it. And I'm like, that's cool. Is it worth getting into this game to play it once a year? I don't think so, but it does look cool.
As I always warn people off of Adeptus Titanicus, Legions Imperialis, in the sense that, like, are they great? Yeah, super great. Do you know anybody that plays it?
Yeah.
You want to know at least one other person, and preferably 3 other people that play it, so that you get your enjoyment out of it. But they're fantastic. I'm not even going to say they aren't. They're amazing. Let's kind of wrap up here. We got a couple other things real quick. Strong leadership and management, right? Like, somebody has to clearly be the organizer and GM role. And even if that person is playing in the game, you have to be willing to let them make some adjustments on the fly for people. But that person also has to have a very balanced approach, meaning just because your side's getting its teeth kicked in, you can't just suddenly go, well, now we all get 50% more units.
Right.
But this person is going to be there to resolve disputes, ensure fair play, that kind of thing. And, honestly, as adults, like, I've run plenty of D&D games. I've run plenty of campaigns for 40K. Josh has run tons of Necromunda stuff. Like, we get that, and we want to participate too. So we always make sure any judgments we're making are weighted very carefully to not skew something, drastically in one direction or another. I think the closest I ever came, Campbell, was that Tyranid game where I was like, this is just not working out for the Tyranid side. Like, we didn't win a game. And it was just like, at a certain point, I almost said, you know what, the Tyranid should get 25% more experience. I don't know another way to solve this right now. That's a good blanket rule, I think. Yeah. And in hindsight, it probably would have worked out just fine. And I bet everybody on the other side would have been like, yeah, go for it.
I mean, I think the thing is, if you're halfway through a campaign and the NIDs haven't won a game yet, I'm here to shoot bugs. Give me more bugs to shoot. I think that a GM should be able to deputize someone if the group's of a certain size. Because that's
a good point.
If it's 3 people, okay, fine. But if it's like an 8-person campaign, maybe have someone else on hand who can at least answer some questions. Maybe there's when you plan the event or the League Crusade thing with. Maybe
Yeah,
they're
that's
just
actually a really good point.
maybe they're just also like I think every group has, oh, you're the rules person. You're the one who knows all the rules. Deputize that one.
Yeah.
Because you want to have someone on hand to resolve those disputes because you're not always going to be around.
And bring them into the fold. I love that you're like, I almost feel like it's a 2-person job to run the campaign.
The Nova narratives back in the day, actually, even now,
I played in one.
Yeah, they're all 2-person jobs.
Yeah.
There's always a main organizer and like an assistant who is either there for off hours to cover when the other one's getting lunch or whatever, or just to help run. And I don't think that's enough for how many people are involved in that. But in an 8-person group, 2 judges, not that bad.
Yeah.
And honestly, that deputized person, they can play too. Like
they should.
Yeah, they should.
At least as a ringer, if nothing else. And then you want to keep everybody moving. I love the idea that you threw out there about how the Mordheim game had like the weekly town crier and stuff. Like you want to do some method of updating everybody at every stage of the campaign. Here's where everything sits and where you're going. I think it also lets people still feel in touch with what's going on and feel like a part of something larger than I just played a game this week.
Yeah.
And last but not least, encouraging sportsmanship. I mean, it should go without saying at this point, especially if you're a listener to this show, we value this a tremendous amount. I was just joking with somebody the other day about how I think it was Travis talking about Cheyenne beating him all the time. And I said, yeah, I used to play competitive tournaments. We were talking about you guys in your show. And I said, I used to play competitive tournaments in 5th edition. I was playing a lot of them. And I said, I would always be like upper middle of the pack in my games. And so, I mean, not terribly well. I go, but God help me, I always won the sportsmanship award.
That's the best one to win. Genuinely.
And I sent him a picture. One of my favorite awards is the Grand Wad I won as sportsman. It's this cool like orc plaque. I'll post a picture of it, but it's pretty cool.
I think, encouraging sportsmanship is something you should do in all events, all games, everything
Agreed.
From playing a game of checkers with your friends to doing this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, a narrative campaign, whatever you want to call it, is a tool to play a bunch of games with people you like hanging out with.
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, yeah.
And it's on the GM to make sure everyone has a good time.
Yeah.
So whether that's encouraging fun matchups, dealing with problem players, writing cool rules, doing all the extra ancillary stuff like Town Cry or whatever, it's about making sure everyone involved has a good time. And that's the hardest thing to do.
Campbell, I couldn't have said it better. Like I was talking to somebody at work today about this issue we have going on, and we're like, well, we should change this and that and the other thing. And finally, one of the guys goes, well, hang on. What's the problem we're trying to solve for here? Right? Like, what are we actually trying to solve? And sometimes, as we're talking about this minutia, when you just said, ultimately, it's just playing games with friends, the people you want to play games with, and it's a mechanic or facility to allow you to do that. I'm like, well, yeah, ultimately, like that's the problem you're trying to solve. Play games and then have some kind of story around it. Like that's it. Like bottom line. So don't worry about it.
It's structured playtime.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I think that's a great summary right there. So let's do this. We'll take a short break. We'll come back and then we'll close out the show.
Sounds good.
All right, we're back and we're closing out the show. And Campbell, we had another bullet point in the list here, and I just deleted it because I think you kind of nailed it with that last statement about just the facility, encouraging people to be together and just play games for fun.
I mean, if you let me talk for 2.5 hours, I'll eventually say something smart.
I feel like I'm talking too much. Feel free to interrupt me. I will talk my wife's ear off.
Duly noted. Well, tune in next episode for me cutting off mid-sentence half the time and talking over you the other half of the time.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think as many pitfalls, pratfalls, problems we've talked about and run into, we've both been in successful successful, not successive events, maybe successive, who knows, but we've both been successful narrative events, whether they were RPG campaigns, Necromunda Weekenders, 40K campaigns, whatever. Like, and the thing that has made all of those things work are some of the things we've observed here, and just people being chill, man. Like, people being cool. Like, again, it's all about having a good time with your pals.
I think also as you get older, I mean, the reality is, as you get older, like, you distill your friends down to a group of people that you really like to spend time with. You know? I mean, when I was younger, there were always people that, you know, you're like, oh yeah, we have this group, and then we have these couple of people in the group that we, you know, don't quite fit with, you know. And then as you get older, you're kind of like, yeah, I'm past that point. so the people I'm hanging out with these days are the people I really want to spend time with, you know.
Yeah. If I'm not at a tournament, I'm very choosy about who I'm spending 3 hours across the table from.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I got into 40K, Campbell, was our D&D group couldn't meet regularly anymore. We used to play every Sunday for like 6-7 hours. And then I was looking for a game I could play with somebody else. The counter to that about spending 3 hours with somebody is it's 3 hours. And if it's not gone well, you're like, well, I don't have to do this anymore. Or I throw the game and I'm like, hey, you win. Good job.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, I'm particular about who I'm going to spend my chosen free time with these days. And fortunately, I have a plethora of people to choose from that I really enjoy playing with. So it works out pretty well.
Yeah, I'm also very fortunate to have a rich well of very lovely people here to play Warhammer with.
I do have to tell you, I know you still have that challenge coin.
I do still have that challenge coin
that I lost to you at Adepticon a number of years ago.
Yep.
I don't think I'm ever going to be able to get it back because you're progressing so much better than
because I've been snowballing this whole time. Yeah, I used that as my Oath of Moment target marker, and
I'm glad it has some value.
I had it with me at Nova. I was like, maybe I'll find the time. Maybe I'll find the time to challenge Sheldon. I already was in a 9-game GT, and I got an extra game in with my buddy Peter. So I don't think an 11th game was in the cards that weekend.
I'm telling you, like, Shell and I completed 2 full rounds, and I could see in her face she was exhausted. I go, now imagine these guys that are playing this. Like, I don't know how you guys do it.
It's a marathon. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Listen, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't keep talking about campaigns if I didn't have some good experience with them and had enjoyed them in the past. If it was something I played and I was like, that sucked, you know, I'd be done with it. But also I'd say if you've had a bad experience with it, you might want to give it another go, try a simpler approach. So, okay. Campbell, you got anything going on we should let people know about over at Goonhammer?
Yeah, we're putting out video content like, right now I'm doing a bunch of videos about the new points updates and balance updates for 40K. I was exporting one of those minutes before we started recording today, so keep your eyes peeled in the Goonhammer YouTube channel to watch those and hear more of me talking about Warhammer in case you...
Give me the scoop. How did Chaos do?
Oh, Chaos did good.
How did Sisters do?
Sisters got a much needed nerf because they were absolutely clearing house. They were burning down the house, if you will. I'm not... Triumph of St. Catherine went up 60 points.
I don't use it, so I'm good there.
Most things went up like 10 for Sisters.
Okay,
but they got a few rules clarifications, like Bringers of the Flame. That like detachment got a bit of a hit because it was
that's
really
what I was gonna do.
Because it's really good. It's really freaking good. There's also a clarification on surge moves. So like Accursed Cultists, Khorne Berserkers, Thunderwolves, in some situations they could move when you shot them, and there were things where it's like, oh, some of them could just keep doing it forever, and now it's once per phase, max of 6 inches. Even if you don't go anywhere, you still count as having made that move, so you don't get to like save it for later, which is big because that was one of the things that made both Wolf Jail and Cultist Jail really oppressive, was these lists you couldn't shoot. So like when I played against Cultist Jail at Nova, I didn't engage until I knew I could kill that unit in one go. So I'd like shoot it when I was 7 inches away once to make sure it didn't get any closer, and then I would charge it with everything it needed. So things like that have been kind of clarified a bunch. And then there's some kind of granular stuff about some secondaries have changed a little bit, but nothing too wild. It's a fairly light touch, I'd say, balance-wise, but the game was in a pretty good place to to begin with.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I've just been handed a note, by the way. You should plug the Table War Hawaii tournament.
Oh,
Shell just handed that over.
Please
The War
plug away.
on the Shore. It's a 40K charity GT. It's being held in Camp Erdman, Oahu on the 10th of January to the 12th of January. It's a 64-player Swiss tournament. Shell and I will both be there. It's on the North Shore of Oahu. It's going to be awesome. There's a link to it on our Facebook group. I'll put one. I think I have it on the Facebook page as well, but I'll also put it at the Independent Characters and a link in the show notes.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. This sounds amazing. I'm going to plug it now.
Dude,
So
if you can make it out there.
all-inclusive 4-day, 3-night retreat with lodging and 9 meals for $300. 2 3.5-hour matches per day on the beach.
You got to get out
chill.
there.
Yeah, you got to get out there, which ain't nothing, but
from the West Coast, it's not bad.
No,
it's going to be awesome.
this sounds
going to be
amazing.
awesome.
This sounds amazing.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it. And I know Josh is going, and I think Adon is going. Myself and Shell are going. Obviously, Todd from Table War will be there. A bunch of people will be there. And it's going towards a good cause, right?
Mm-hmm.
Table War Charities, which is autism advocacy. We help, parents and families with kids that are struggling with autism in school to negotiate the appropriate school responses to these kinds of things and help them get the help they need. So it's a great charity as well. You can find more about that at tablewarcharities.com or .org. It might be .org. I'll put a link in the show notes.
.org.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
You're in the fact checker booth.
Thank you. But it's going to be awesome. Plus it's Hawaii. So
yeah, no, this seems like a great time for a great cause.
It's going to be fantastic. Okay. Leave us reviews on iTunes. Check out media.goonhammer.com for more shows and information and all kinds of great stuff there. We have a Facebook group. I just mentioned that. You're well aware of that by now. We have a Patreon to help support the show and support what we're doing. And sounding like Josh may be able to come back pretty soon. So we'll see in the next month. I think Josh may make a return. Hopefully.
Awesome.
Keep my fingers crossed. That doesn't mean you're going anywhere though, Campbell. You're going to stay with us till the bitter end. By bitter end, I mean when Dan takes you back.
Yeah. He is pretty bitter.
Dan, we're thinking about you. And so until next time, this is Carl.
This is Campbell.
We're coming to you from the from the Astronomicon and remotely, where campaigns can be rewarding if you can pull them off.
And heartbreaking when you don't.
Oh, well played. All right. Thank you so much. And we will see you next time. This episode of The Independent Characters is protected by the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find information on the front page at theindependentcharacters.com.